let's all use our buttons today.
Oh, the buttons.
Make no promises.
Oh, Joanne, you're good at the button. You beat me most of the time.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council with all council members present. It is Monday, December 9th, and it's 9 a.m. If you would, please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
We gather here today intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, guided by understanding and wisdom. We seek to serve with respect for all. May our personal faiths give us strength to act honestly and well in all matters before us. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to apologize in advance if I have any coughing attacks, but I have a good stash of Ricolas right here, so it should be all right. first item on our agenda is the approval of the final agenda, and may I have a motion for that, please?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilmember Hossafras and seconded by Vice Mayor Murphy. If everyone would please log their votes on the computer, and the motion carries unanimously.
It's not
He
letting
didn't
us.
push the second. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that
Thank
it's
you.
going to pass unanimously. Okay? We have these little computer glitches every day. Next item is local achievements and, or no, I'm sorry, is public comment. And the first person to speak is Jesse Schmid. Jesse, when you get up there, will you tell us how to pronounce your last name properly? Is it Schmidt or Schmid?
Schmid.
Okay. So it sounds like a T, but it's not.
No, not at all.
Got it.
My wife Jody and I moved down here about 5
Jesse,
months
just say
ago.
your name for the record, will you?
Jesse Schmid.
Perfect.
My wife and I moved down here about 5 months ago, and we have 3 young sons. They're 8, 5, and 3, and one of them goes to the beach school. And the weather is what brought us here. We've been coming here for around 20 years, and we have 2 boys that have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so we needed nice weather. So we're down here, and we want to invest in the beach. So we've bought a couple houses already, and we're in the process of buying another one from Joe Orlandini. The house has some lien issues. It's kind of under a blanket umbrella of violations. And there, when all the other violations and liens are taken care of, there's around $50,000 left. And we would like to pledge that $50,000 towards his liens to get the blanket, get that house off of the liens if we could, please. So,
That it, Jesse?
yes, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll bring that up under my councilperson's items, Jesse. Thank you. Next speaker is Joe Orlandini.
Joe Orlandini. I guess I better explain what Jesse is trying to interpret to you. There is a particular property I have at 80 Avenue E that has some encumbersome on it of liens. The parcel has made it so 4 other parcels have liens on them as well. And what we are asking for and why we are coming to public comment is we did not make it on the agenda, and then to find out that you have a meeting, your next meeting's in January is why we are asking. We're looking to close a property at 1560 I Street, and that is the one that is in the umbrella of the parcels that got encumbered from the 80 Avenue E violation. As Jesse said, there's about $50,000 that remains that is willing to be placed into an account or an escrow, however would be worthy to work that process to cover violation costs. The motive obviously is to sell this property. It does unload some debt, which would be good to get rid of it. The only reason it's being held on to is because of the lien. So ungluing this property helps tremendously with getting rid of debt that's unwanted.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Karen Woodson. Ms. Woodson, your resume is impressive. I'm glad to meet
Well,
you in
thank
person.
you. Thank you, thank you. I'm Karen Woodson. I wanted to introduce myself. I have applied for the advisory committee of Bay Oaks. My husband and I moved, well, we bought our home here in 2015. We actually moved here permanently from Minneapolis, September of 2018. I'm retired 40 years in human resources. My husband is 37 years retired from the Air Force. So we are really excited to be here. We're looking to be more involved in the community, contribute whatever we can. We have a lot of good background, a lot of people skills, that type of thing. We are members of Bay Oaks. I have the same crud, by the way, Anita.
I'm telling you, it's just, it's relentless.
It is, it's horrible. But I wanted to introduce myself and hope that I can make a difference and contribute to the ward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thanks for your application.
Anita, may I just say welcome to the community and thank you to your husband for his service.
Okay, that completes my list of speakers, but if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak, you're welcome to. Anyone? Okay, public comment is closed. The next item on the agenda is local achievements and recognitions, and Mr. Murphy, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, we have with us Captain Casey Streeter from the Florida Commercial Watermen's Conservation Group. I don't know if you all remember this. Some time back, we had Captain Streeter come and speak with us. He and other commercial fishermen and shrimpers, crabbers, lots of guys who make their living out on the water came to us with a presentation about this program that they're starting to monitor red tide offshore. That was a particular category where when we had all of our troubles 2 years ago, there was a lot of attention being paid to the river and the bays and so forth, but not too much as to the causes and so forth and durations of red tides offshore. These guys got together and decided that there was a need, and I was at their organizational meeting up on Pine Island last year, and that night about 300 of these guys showed up. So it was no small feat. So they've come a long way since that. Their goal was to get these, and they have a partnership with NOAA over on the East Coast in Miami, I believe. Casey, you can talk more about it. But so what they have are these machines, and they give them to the commercial fishermen, and when they're offshore, excuse me, I've got a little bit of it, and they
Have a Ricola.
thank you. They take their samples offshore, and they're transmitted automatically back to the computers in NOAA's headquarters in Miami, who analyzes the data, and what they're trying to do is create a baseline of the red tide, where it is, and the frequency, and so forth and so on, and then come to some scientific conclusions later on down the road. So what the town of Fort Myers Beach has done, along with other communities, has partnered with the commercial watermen, because we're very interested in the water off of our shore as well. And it's our goal is that the communities all up and down the coast will follow in with this as well, and keep this program going, and hopefully we'll be able to reap some very good benefits from it down the road. So anyhow, today Captain Streeter is here, and thanks to the generous donation of the good people of Fort Myers Beach, we've been able to purchase one of these measuring devices, which will be given to a local captain of ours here on Fort Myers Beach, who commercial fishes and charter fishes, and we'll be collecting data offshore along with the other fishermen that are already off of Pine Island and so forth, and I think down in Naples and other places. So without further ado, and talking on my part, I'm going to introduce Captain Streeter here to make a few comments, and then we're going to give the captain a check for his equipment. Casey?
Good morning, Casey.
Good morning. I want to thank Mayor Anita.
Casey, just say your name for the record, please.
Casey Streeter, founder of Florida Commercial Watermen's Conservation, commercial fisherman, offshore charter captain. Again, I want to thank you for your support in the group. You know, this equipment is, we're using it, but it's your equipment. Keeps shutting off for whatever reason. You know, we have been testing. We have our data. You know, Chris Kelp.
Keep your finger on the button there.
Maybe if he switches microphones.
This one? No, gotcha.
We're getting new ones, Casey. Maybe next time you're here, we'll have.
I hope your boats run better than the equipment here. But go ahead.
Some days they do, some days they don't. They're boats for sure. But, you know, we have been testing, we have been monitoring our red tide situation over the last several months. Obviously, we all know that we've had the red tide fire back up, but we're starting to calm down, which is a beautiful thing. But some of the data that came from my boat, we have already contributed a lot to science. On a Friday, we tested under 1 million count red tide, and then on a Tuesday, we saw 38 million count in the same exact spot. So it's completely changed the idea of how these red tides work and how fast they intensify to science. And we're just in the beginning parts of this. So we, as Vice Mayor Ray said, we have equipment in Naples, Venice Inglewood, and then 2 units on Pine Island. And then now we have one here in Fort Myers. So we were asked to submit into the Stalin Kennedy grant, SK grant through NOAA, which will give us 28 more testing equipments. And that'll expand us from Key West through the Panhandle. So these other coastal communities see the value in this. I mean, there is definitely value in being out there testing this offshore water. A lot happens out there before it comes ashore. And if we can, again, create that baseline and better understand these influencers, we can maybe address some of the issues that are contributing to these intensities increases, and potentially, hopefully, a forecasting outlook, which would be great for everybody. And that'll be done through AOML. So this testing equipment, I'll show you really quick. Very simple for our fishermen to use. The SON unit here is tracking salinity, temperature, dissolved oxygens, and chlorophyll A's. And also we will be adding a nutrient sensor to this equipment, which will be very valuable in the offshore to see how the onshore waters are affecting the offshore. This is deployed. It's connected through a cable and a Bluetooth device. The reading goes onto the handheld unit. It's stored, takes a reading every 2 seconds. When our fishermen come into shore, they simply create an email file and send it directly to NOAA. That information is graphed by NOAA, and then the information is stored on the GCOOS server. So all of our science groups have access to this. So very important, obviously, and we're very grateful for your support again. This will definitely help science better understand these things. So thank you very much.
Good work, Captain Streeter. Good work.
We thank you and your men for all that you do. You're doing the heavy work offshore. This is the least that we can do to support your efforts. Casey, if you would, just take one moment to tell the audience here and the people at home what your involvement is, as we discussed prior to the meeting, as far as the Gulf Council goes and your future plans and what have you.
So obviously very involved with the fishery and the management of the fishery. Was recently selected to an ecosystem technical committee. Gulf Council oversees all the Gulf fisheries from Texas to Florida. So, to bring Southwest Florida's red tide issues and concerns to that stage is very important, with the effects on the community, the social economic aspects, and also the effects on the ecosystems and the fisheries themselves. So hopefully we'll be able to pursue that, keep the attention on our problems so we can keep the science on our side and moving forward. And then also I'll be putting my application in to join the Gulf Council, again, to keep our interest here in our area with our fisheries and our water and everything that's attached to it in the spotlight moving forward in a positive direction.
Excellent.
Well, we will support you in that in that nomination when the time comes, and it can only help us to have a representative local here on that prestigious council. So we wish you well with that, and when the time comes, you'll get the support from us. With that being said, Madam Chair, if Casey'd like to come up, we'll give you we'll present you with your check, and maybe we can take a picture with the council up here. Yeah, and hold your gear. How's that?
Perfect. You get it.
Yeah. Why don't you come up here and we'll just give it a little shake. That way everybody can have it around.
Casey, what's in the box?
So that's the hard case. It holds our equipment, cables, weights. We use our weighted device so we can do the full column. That's what our fishermen will have on their boat. We'll have your placard, because our equipment will say donated by the city. Supporting this
That's
aspect.
nice.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Great.
Excellent. Okay, Gary, ready?
Okay. Everyone say clean water.
Clean
Clean water. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Very
Casey.
grateful.
It's good to see you.
Appreciate you guys.
Merry
Thank you very
Christmas,
much.
honey.
Merry Christmas.
Very much.
Good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Keep up the good work.
I hope you still have time to fish.
the value of this is it just takes minutes, so.
Oh, good.
Incorporated into our day-to-day.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, anything else, Ray?
That's enough.
Bruce, anything? Roxanne?
I jotted down a couple notes. I was thinking, you know, we do a lot of recognition of different groups. They put on a big event, they buy Christmas gifts for kids, et cetera, and we recognize these one-time events. But the thing that we don't do is we don't recognize the people that are out there doing something every day and every week for this community. So just a few of them that I wanted to recognize today. Beach Baptist Church runs the Choice Market. People can come and get groceries if they need food every week of the year. There are volunteers there working from our community. A group leaves Chapel by the Sea every Thursday to go put siding on houses for Habitat for Humanity. Again, volunteers from our community that do this every week. Beach Methodist Church offers a grief support group. There are people there to help people who are having mental health issues due to grief. So I just wanted to recognize some of those folks on the island who aren't just doing a one-time thing for the community. They're there every week helping.
Thank you, Roxanne. Yeah, love it. Joanne?
And I'll go to the holiday events then. Congratulations to Beach Kids Foundation and for their good event and Chamber Boat Parade. Make sure you get out next weekend and support the Mound House and the Christmas Tree Festival. The Friends of Bay Oaks need board members. You can contact Denise Moynihan for that. Remember that as we celebrate, as we celebrate New Year's Eve and the town has fireworks, remember, however, that they're illegal the rest of the way down the island in the town of Fort Myers Beach. And also, I just wish for everyone, happy holidays, no matter what your faith and how you celebrate it. We wish you all peace on earth and a happy new year.
Okay, that's it for local achievements and recognitions. We'll move on to advisory committees, items, and reports. Is there anyone here to give a report today?
Kathy Light is here.
Good morning, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Light, Chair of the Anchorage Advisory Committee, and I'm here just for a few moments to talk about an issue that our committee has been working on for a couple of years, really, about whether we should continue to have Matanzas as our upland service provider or take it in-house, build our own facility. The Anchorage Advisory Committee has been very happy with Matanzas, with their service. But we have had some guests to our committee meetings that have pointed out to us that our shower facilities, we are underserving our mooring ball population. We at Matanzas have 2 very nice suites of restroom, shower combined in one, but we have a 70-ball field. And so in season, we could potentially have 140 or more people wanting to use those 2 units. One of the things that we would like to do, we feel we need to expand and have 4 to 6 units. And as you know, we are also going forward potentially to expand the field in the future. Perhaps we are going forward with the land lease by the Coast Guard station, which could potentially add 19 more balls. So we're underserved at this point. So at our last meeting, we made a motion to ask Town Council to have staff look into potential sites that we might build a site on. Now, you know, we don't know if that will really work, if we'll find sites or not. I mean, we're kind of, but we need to look and see if we can do that. A couple of weeks ago, the committee met with the planners of, among other things, Bayside Park. The Anchorage Advisory Committee feels that would be the perfect spot for it because it's right by our dinghy dock. Obviously, we need water access for our patrons. It's in the heart of Times Square area. it would be the perfect spot for it. However, on the other side, which is why we made the motion for looking at other sites, we realize there are many other groups in the community that think that's the perfect spot for what they want as well. So I just wanted to bring our motion to your attention that, as I said, we don't know if this will work for us to take it in-house or not, but we would like for town council to ask staff to try to identify sites that we might potentially do that.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy? Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Anyone else here to give a report today? We'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the town council regular meeting of November 18th. We've got a motion by Joanne and a second
Whoa.
by Ray Murphy. And now let's, under discussion, Rexanne has
I would
comments.
ask for an amendment. Page 13, in the middle of the page, the last sentence before the words public comment, it says people slashing across the lagoon. I don't think anybody's out there with swords fighting.
Slashing,
So I'm hoping it's
splashing.
supposed to be splashing across the lagoon.
Okay.
And I've got to figure out what it means. Oh, on packet page 10, the next to the last paragraph, Town Attorney Heron noted that the applicant would improve the vacated public access. I don't believe that's what he said. I believe he said that there would be another public access which would be improved. This kind of implies that the one that we were dealing with was the one that was going to become the new public access, and I don't think that's the case. So I think that sentence needs to be reworded to reflect what he actually said.
Clarification there. Anything else, Rexanne?
That's it.
Okay, so the motion will include the comments made by Councilmember Hossafras. So
second it.
there's a,
Yes, I amend the motion for
Sure.
that.
so there's a motion and a second, and waiting on Mr. Butcher to log his vote, and the motion carries unanimously. The next item is the consent agenda, and and if I could please have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so
Sorry,
there's
I
a
hit the
motion
button
and a
already.
second.
You had it right.
And the motion, waiting on Mr. Murphy to,
Oh, my God.
okay, so the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
It may be a little bit like a TV game.
Yeah, right.
Game show.
So, Ms. Woodson, that included you,
Yes, Ms.
You were on the
Woodson, you are
consent agenda.
approved. Absolutely.
agenda.
And thank you very much for your application. So the next item on the agenda is, these are public hearings now, is the Mango Street variance and special exception. And this is a case relative to the Mango Street bed and breakfast. And we'll start with you, Sarah. John, is this ex parte?
Yes.
Okay, so,
So, this and the next item. So, if, with your permission, I'll swear in the witnesses for the 126 Mango Street variance and special exception application and the first reading and public hearing on ordinance 19-14, public CPD.
so anyone here that's here to speak on the public's CPD or Mango Street Inn, would you please stand to be sworn in? Anybody who's going to speak at all? Because if you're not sworn in, you won't be able to speak. Okay? Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Do you
Thank
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Do. The witness has been sworn.
Thank you. Joanne, do you have ex parte?
Site visit only.
Rexanne?
I've spoken with Mr. Andre.
Ray?
None.
Bruce? I've spoken at length with Dan Andre early on this process. So, okay, then now we'll begin. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning.
Good
Sarah
morning.
Probst with Community Development. Dan Andre, owner of 126 Mango Street, is seeking a special exception and a variance. The special exception is to allow a bed and breakfast on a property zoned residential multifamily. A bed and breakfast is listed as use in the table permitted only by special exception in the RM zoning district. The bed and breakfast has been operated since 2008, but it does not appear that approval was ever received by the town. The variance being sought is from Section 34-1803 to allow a bed and breakfast layout that is different from the code requirement of a maximum of 3 rooms per building. The existing bed and breakfast has a configuration of 4 guest rooms in one building and 2 guest rooms and the innkeeper's residence in the other building. The variance would allow the layout to remain the same and would not allow an increase in the number of total rooms permitted. This layout allows a total of 6 guest units and would be permitted within the 2 buildings per the code. The LPA heard the special exception and recommended approval at the November 12th LPA hearing. At that hearing, it came to staff's attention that the variance would be needed. The LPA heard the variance at the November 19th meeting and recommended approval. Staff recommends that council approve the variance and the special exception with the conditions attached. And the applicant is also here.
Thank you very much. Mr. Andre, would you like to make any comments?
Good morning. Dan
Morning.
Andre, owner, Mango Street Inn. I can give you the narrative, or I can just answer questions. It's your choice.
It's up to you, whichever you prefer.
No, the only request that I would make during this process, at one meeting when I signed a letter of compliance, I was told that I would get my application fee back. And then I was told a little later I couldn't. The town is absolutely right that we need the variance. I know the code a little better than I did in 08. When you look at table 31-2 or 34-1, 34-2, we need a special exception, no question about it. I wish I'd known this 12 years ago when we asked the town, what do we need to do and how do we do it? Having said that, my only request, other than approval, would be a refund of the application fee. This reconfiguration has cost me $20,000. In the time we've been in business, we've paid over $250,000. Sales tax, bed tax, property tax. So that's all my request is.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions? Dan, stay. Dan? Dan, just stay for 1 second. Bruce, any questions for Dan?
Not really, but I guess I'll go feel obligated to ask you at least one.
Okay.
So when you said you had to spend $20,000, what was that for?
Reconfiguration of the rooms, because we put it into a 3-3. And once I got the notice of violation, we were looking at magistrates and all that, so we reconfigured the entire inn. I moved out of my residence. We rented a house, trees living there. According to the code, somebody has to be on the property. So unintended consequences of this is that Tree and I will be separated, not by choice, for 6 months, because we had to rent out our unit because we need the revenue.
Thanks for that clarification.
Welcome.
Ray, any questions?
Are you okay, Dan, with the conditions that were placed on the?
Yeah.
Okay. And how much was the application fee?
$3,800.
$3,800? And you feel that you shouldn't have to pay that? Why?
We've been in business for 12 years. I mean, this came up after 12 years.
Oh, so it was, okay. I think I know where you're going with that. Okay, good. Thank you.
Rexanne, questions for Dan?
I have no questions. The packet was very complete.
Joanne, any questions?
Just a couple. They already asked about the conditions. An additional thing, you'll register with the state as a B&B then? There's a difference between a B&B and a hotel motel. If we pass this, will you then register as a B&B?
The way it works is I have to
With
register as a motel with the state.
Because it shows 2 different categories. If you're required to register as a B&B, you will.
Yes.
Thank you. And then you had mentioned that you've rented a home off, and I know that you know per our code, in 34-1805A, that the innkeeper must reside on premises whenever the units, you'll get back to fulfilling that of the innkeeper?
I already am.
You are.
I live in what was one of the 4 configurations.
Right.
I had to convert that into a kitchen so I could prepare breakfast.
Right.
So that's where I live.
But I'm sorry, I thought your previous statement implied that you got a house and then you wound up renting another unit and da-da-da. So
It's true.
We're all on the same page. then.
Right.
That's
Tree
all.
and I, there's not enough space in that one place for the two of us.
Thank you, Dan. That's all.
Ultimately, Dan, will you have someone, will you hire someone else to be the innkeeper?
No.
No. Okay. All right.
And I have one other thought, I just thought of, this is interesting, that if you go to the tax collectors, because you need a business tax receipt in order to open your business, and I called them and I asked them, I said, do you have to have approval from the town to issue this license? And they said, yes. I said, can I see my original application? We only keep records for 7 years.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I'll open the public comment. Does anybody wish to make comment on the Mango Street Inn special exception? No one? I'll close the public comment. Council, if there's no questions for staff or
Madam Chair, I'll
are
make
there
a motion to approve the special exception with the conditions stated, and also I'm of a mind to relieve him of his application fee as well.
I mean, return the fee?
Return it, yes.
I'll second that.
Would
I'm
please log
sorry.
your votes?
Yep.
That's okay.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Yes, I think it's important that we add this to the record, please. And that is that per 34-1803C, there's no requirement for some of this if the intensity is 3 units or less. And I think the fact that this is a 4-unit and 2-unit, winding up at 6, which could easily have been 3 and 3, is the extraordinary or unique or unusual circumstance whereby this can go as a special exception and not require a CPD. And I just want that in the record, that it meets the intent of the code for density, despite the fact that it's 4.2 compared to 3.3. And that's why I think that the special exception and variance that are requested are appropriate in this unique circumstance.
Thank you, Joanne. Any further discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. The motion maker, Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
and Rexanne.
Yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
And I say yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Dan. And staff.
Continued success there, Dan. You've been there a lot of
Absolutely.
years. Continued success.
Joanne, would you log your vote so we can?
I hit it. I didn't take it. Okay, thank you.
There you go. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a proposed first hearing to ordinance 1914, to move this to a second hearing for adoption, consideration of adoption, amending the previously approved Publix CPD. All witnesses have been sworn in. Did anybody come in before or now who has not been sworn, who's going to give testimony? Okay. Ex parte communication, Joanne?
No, none since the previous hearing, no.
Rexanne?
None since the previous hearing.
None.
Ray? Bruce?
Site visit.
My ex parte is a lot of public comment to me, including last night in my home, all of my employees weighing in on what they thought about this and what they really would like to see Publix do. So it's just conversational. Go ahead, Jason.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you.
before Mr. Green starts, just want to state for the record that this first reading has been properly advertised.
Thank you, Mr. Herron.
Good morning, Jason Green, Community
Good morning.
Development. I have been sworn. Publix is, the application is DCI 2019-0023. As you noted, it's a request for a CPD, or amendment to their CPD. This also offers an opportunity to replace the resolutions that were previously approved with an ordinance, as is our practice now. Those previous resolutions were 9811, 9811A, and was amended by Resolution 0106. And this is proposed ordinance to replace those. As such, at 4791 Estero Boulevard, being the commercial plan development, it's a chance to clean up some of the language in the schedule of uses, primarily being the liquor store, but also as was requested as part of the LPA meeting, adding pharmacy to that. Through this process, it was recognize that the square footage, not just the addition of the liquor store area is an addition to the square footage, but also that the approved 28,000 square feet was not entirely accurate for what was actually built. It was a couple hundred square feet more than that, so that amends the CPT for the 32,117 plus or minus square feet. The need for the public hearing portion and the amendment to the CPD for the liquor store obviously is the codes require anything within a 500 feet of residences either go through, there's some other special exception processes, or a CPD process, which is before you. There is a reduction in some parking spaces. However, Publix has provided sufficient parking per our code on site based on LPA conversation, public input, and obviously you guys have had some input on this before. There is some concern about access, which my understanding they'll address, and that they are looking forward to presenting that to you at some point. So if you have any specific questions, the application was essentially found to be consistent with LDC section 34-85. There's conditions of approval that have been modified and schedule of uses. We have not included specific turn lane to the entrance. That is something that I think we'll have to look at. Staff has not had an opportunity to review any designs or any concept plans. And we have to coordinate with Lee County still on that component, but that is something that we can address during today and at the hopefully the second hearing if you choose to take it to a second hearing. If you have any other questions about the specifics of the changes, I'd be happy to answer them.
Jason?
I have a question based on what you just said.
Sure.
The turn lane, my understanding was to be in the parking lot, not on the street. So why would Lee County have anything to do with it?
The access to Estero Boulevard, the turn lane has to connect to the right-of-way. You actually have to connect to the street edge so that you have to.
So because we're widening the entrance, they have something to say about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's like
Thank
we
you.
do a driveway permit on our local streets, it would require
I
a
get it
driveway
now.
permit, yes. So, and that is something, I've mentioned it to the county just so they know it's coming, not having seen it for us to review. We don't know the depth, we don't know the stacking, and we also don't know if Lee County's in favor of that, but I've started that conversation with them just to give them a heads up.
Joanne, questions for Jason?
We're in our own street lighting review, and that property is unique because as a parking lot, it has lighting, and it sits elevated, and I'm wondering, has there just been an environmental review from the beach to make sure that we don't have an issue with any of the the lights most approximate to the beach?
There has not been any re-review of the power of the lights, the strength of the lights at the property lines that was originally done at the development of it. However, I guess to your point, perhaps that's something that could be, depending on bulb changes over the years, that maybe it changed it, we could reevaluate it.
A quick look might be in order, just to
Sure.
advise them about anything, any situation they might be in.
Okay.
Especially if they're moving and putting an extra lane, which we hope they do, it may entail some change in lighting, and those are the ones most close to the beach. It might be appropriate for us to help advise them
Sure. So,
about the state statutes on that.
yes, so if the use is approved and moving forward to the second hearing, and if that's approved, the changes to the CPD then, the next step would have to go through administratively through basically a development order revision, which then we can look at that as part of that.
Just a note, I don't often go out to the store at night, but I did the other night, and I did notice that their lights out by the street are amber.
Anything else, Joanne?
No, that's all. Thank you so much.
Ray, any questions for Jason?
I don't have any questions per se, but I do have a comment. I had a little flashback here. 21 years ago, when we had the original hearing for Publix, Publix at the time offered the neighborhood to the immediate south of Publix an entranceway through that wall, so those people could walk to get their groceries at the store. And at the time, the neighborhood didn't want that at all. And I'm just curious, as time moves on, if the people that are in that neighborhood now might be interested in something like that. For the life of me, I couldn't understand why they didn't want it at the time, because, I mean, as a kid, I remember walking to the grocery store, my mother sending me all the time, and it seems to me, for those people in that neighborhood, they could just walk down the street, walk through the gate or the opening, and go into Publix, and those are so many more cars that we don't have out on Estero Boulevard, particularly in a rough spot like Publix, as it's turned out to be. So I'm just throwing that out there, that if the people in that neighborhood are listening, and if they read about it in the local paper, if they're still interested in something like that, that maybe Publix may be amenable to doing something like that with the neighborhood. I know it's not in this, what we're discussing today, but who knows? If they were interested, maybe it could be a condition of redevelopment.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Bruce, any questions for Jason?
Yep. So, as this is being presented, what is our position on that expanded exit lane?
I have not had a plan to review. We have not done that staff-wise. Publix is, I'm sure they'll tell you today, they've looked at it, and I think they've come up with something, but we just haven't had an opportunity. The plan is, my understanding is the plan is for us to get that and then be able to review it and talk amongst our staff and the county staff between now and the second public hearing, if you choose to do that.
I guess from my perspective, if I look at packet page 88, number 11, it says, whether the location of the request places an undue burden on existing transportation or other services and facilities and will be served by the streets and the capacity to carry traffic generated by the development. And then there's this long answer here of, okay. But to me, it does place a burden on exiting the facility. More cars is just more problems, and it's a problem today. So I guess I didn't like the response that we
That's fair enough. I think the response originally was based on, by the code, the number of parking, and by the traffic study shows that there was no significant change from the liquor store. However, I think to your point, operation-wise, stacking, peak times, that sort of thing, that's probably one of the failures of some of the transportation stuff, is looking at that peak. And so they can address that issue, but I think I understand your point.
And then I was thrilled to see on package page 232, that was the reference back to 1998, where it says the approval of this zoning request does not address mitigation of the project's vehicular and pedestrian traffic requirements. Additional conditions may be required to obtain a local development order consistent with the local development regulations. These conditions include a southbound left turn lane and, if necessary, a northbound turn lane, and any expansion or potential restriction to the access to Estero Boulevard. So back in 1998, people were concerned about that exiting.
Correct. And I think this is process. Your specific conditions would be most appropriate. I think what happens sometimes is, based on that condition when it left the council, and it went to staff, and they provide traffic studies and things of that nature, sometimes those numbers don't add up. But maybe from a functional standpoint, it's more appropriate to have those. And
It's easier to look backwards
Sure.
now that we've had the experience.
Sure. And it may have been out of the staff's hand at that time if they provided a technical report that said they don't need one of those turn lanes. It's hard as a staff to administer an extra condition. So that's why I think being more specific from your side for that turn lane would be helpful in the second reading.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Butcher, this probably won't shock you, but in most cases, the traffic engineer for the applicant's report typically supports their application. The question for the council is that whether or not you're comfortable with that and you would like us to, between first and second hearing, or hire our own consultant to do some analysis or not, beyond what they present. So that's really the question at hand, whether you're comfortable with their findings or you want those findings verified.
Well, I guess we'll wait and see what they propose. If they don't propose the additional turn lane, then I think we need to do something about it.
Okay, any other questions, Bruce? We'll go on to the applicant's report. Good morning.
My name is Adrienne Noda with the law firm of Greenspoon Martyr on behalf of the applicant Publix. With me here today is my colleague Joshua Remedios, the applicant's traffic engineer Joaquin Vargas, and Robert Hagler, who's Publix's district manager. As the town mentioned previously, we're here again on a first reading today due to a notice concern. at the last hearing, we were asked to address 5 points that you brought up, and we'd like to briefly address those points. The first point being the pharmacy issue that was previously brought up. So due to the concerns of the town and to have the option available in the future to build out a pharmacy should Publix decide to do so, the ordinance is being amended to permit a pharmacy use. Plastic bags was also brought up as a concern at the last hearing, and while a decision has not been made at this particular time to eliminate the use of single plastic bags, Publix does encourage the use of reusable bags and will continue to do so at the store. Prices was also brought up as an issue to be addressed, and as Mr. Hagler brought up at the prior hearing, the different prices are based on several different factors, mainly doing with the cost of operations of the store on the island, and they're not price differentials across all items, just on select items, and it is due in large part to the fact that the employees who work on the store or work on the island are paid 10% more on every level versus off-island stores. The lighting, as previously mentioned as well, Publix currently utilizes HPS lighting, which has similar wavelengths to amber LED lighting. There is no standard white LED lighting at this Publix store. The HPS lighting facilitates safety for both customers and its store associates in the parking lot, and future lighting and/or replacements will be consistent with their plan, which is similar to the amber lighting. As for the right-hand turn lane, which is the town's biggest concern, Publix is agreeable to adding the right-hand turn lane. The schematics are being finalized. We've talked about it with Jason. We will provide him with the schematics prior to the next hearing in January, so the town has a chance to review and provide comments on the plan to add that right additional turn lane. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Roxanne, I'll start with you. Any questions?
She answered all my questions. Thank you.
Joanne, questions?
No, but I do want to commend Publix. The other day I noticed, and it seems to be at all the Publix, you put the sleeves over reminding everybody to use their reusable bags. So thank you. And in the past, you've been great about not having fireworks display with taking that out, and I'm assuming you'll do that again for us and not have a fireworks display. And I think that's all for now. You addressed my concerns.
Ray, any questions?
Counsel, can you read that condition in the beginning about the pharmacy again, what you said?
Sure. Just due to the concerns of the town that were initially brought up at the LPA meeting and the last hearing, and to have the option available to Publix in the future should they ever decide to build out a pharmacy, the ordinance is being amended to add the pharmacy as a permitted use, so we wouldn't have to come back for a public hearing. They could do that as a matter of right since it would be an approved use.
Would that be something that you'd be looking to do in the present footprint of Publix?
From my understanding, there is enough square footage in the store that they wouldn't have to add additional square footage to add a pharmacy in the future should they decide to do so.
It would be within the existing store?
From my understanding, yes.
Your understanding, okay. Okay.
Bruce, questions?
No, I just want to thank you for considering that turn lane, and as Joanne said, the reminder to get your bags out of your car and bring them in and reuse them. It's very helpful because I just don't have the habit yet of carrying the bags with me, so thanks for that.
You know, these two notions of pharmacy and plastic bags, you said the right-hand turn is really important. It is. I mean, that is a physical, structural thing that's very important to the town and was important back in 1998 because both Ray and I were here on that decision. But I will tell you that overwhelmingly, maybe there were a couple of people that said, yeah, I want a liquor store there. If I've spoken to 100 people, 98 of them want a pharmacy there. And they primarily want the pharmacy because our only other pharmacy access is CVS, and CVS doesn't honor Blue Cross Blue Shield, which the majority of people have. And Tricare, right. So, you know, a pharmacy would be a tremendous addition to the Fort Myers Beach community. The plastic bag issue, you know, I'm a retailer also, and I understand that single-use plastic bag is the cheapest possible thing you could use to put something in. But there are other communities in the state of Florida where Publix has agreed with the community that it's really important to eliminate that single-use plastic. And Publix has a great reputation for being a leader in its field, and I would really love to hear that you would consider eliminating that single-use plastic bag in that store. The amount, I guarantee you there's 100 of them in my house right this second. It is, and they're good to use to, like last night, I sent people home with things in them, but you would really be a leader here for other companies like CVS, and I've eliminated them from my stores, but it would be great if Publix would consider that. So I don't have any other questions of you right this second. I'll open the public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll let you come back up if you need to. So anybody who'd like to make public comment on this case may. Morning, I'd like that shirt to say "Keep it local" color.
Thank you, thank you.
Shameless,
I know.
shameless.
Good morning, my name
Good
is
morning.
Danny Serra.
It's
I'm
nice
the
to see
manager.
you.
Thank you, I'm the manager of the Skipper's Liquors. What Publix will bring to us as a small business will be an unfair competition. We cannot compete with a chain store on prices. I walk into the store, not only Publix, I walk into Walmart liquor store, not to mention Total Wine, and the prices they have. I open my eyes, it surprised me. How they do it, yeah, they have the buying power. Do they make money? Most of the time, they just want the people come into the store. Because I talk to the sales rep, how many cases do we have to buy to match those prices? A lot. Like I said before, as a small business, we cannot cope with it. It's too much for us. So that's why it's an unfair competition with us. Looking at the department of Publix, this Publix is one of the smallest one, or maybe the smallest one I've ever been into it. When people come to the beach, one of the first things I think is seafood. The seafood department of this Publix is kind of tiny, not to mention the meat department or the deli department. So it would be better if they use that space to expand the grocery store. That's what they are, a grocery store, and it's the only one on the beach. So once again, thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amy, will you remember the button? Anyone else like to speak? Is there anyone else who wishes to give public comment? No one? Okay. Yes, sir. Come on up. Have you been sworn in, sir?
No, I haven't.
Okay, we'll swear you in when you're up here. John?
Sir, please raise your, do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Dave Aaron, and I own over at Estero Beach Club,
Yes, sir.
and I'm also on the board of directors. And we all got to notice that this would affect us because we was 500 feet within this public hearing. I don't understand because we're a mile away. Why would we get noticed? We thought maybe they was moving down here to Tops. Is
No.
there any intentions of doing anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay. So they're staying down there. You don't have any idea why we got notice.
Mr. Herron, would you have any answer to that? Could have been a glitch.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I also own a house on the island that's 2601 Estero Boulevard, and they got a notice also. So I'm just wondering if we thought maybe they was moving, which wouldn't be a bad thing, but
Mr. Aaron, I'll have Mr. Green address that question when he comes back up.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir. You were sworn in, weren't you?
No, I have not.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Come on up. John?
Sir, do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Witness has been sworn.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
If you'll speak to the
okay.
microphone, there you go.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Skipper Liquor. I'm the part of the owner in the Skipper Liquor. And we are concerned that, like, when the
Sir,
public.
hold on, can you just tell us your name?
Myself is Jignesh Patel.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'm the part of the owner in the Skipper Liquor. And a minute ago, you said you are the retailer, so you know what the, like, small business are facing the issue. Now, the publics can open the liquor store, or they can open the grocery store, they can expand whatever they like to do it. Our concern is Fort Myers Beach has always been successful for the local businesses. Why don't we keep it local? So my really humble request is, if we can keep it local, and let the publics out of the liquor business, at least on the beach. They already have the liquor store in all other places. So let's keep the local for all the business. What we see on the Fort Myers Beach, most of those 95% business are local. And that's why they have been successful. As soon as chain comes in, they were gonna kill the local store. And that's gonna affect us. In that for particular liquor store, we have 3 family dependent upon that one. So that can also affect our family issue too. So please consider our request to keep it local. Thank you
sir.
very much.
And
Thank you.
thank you very much for
Thank you.
speaking. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone at all? I'll close the public comment then. Is there anyone here from the LPA who would like to make comments from the LPA? Okay. Jason, could you come back up and just explain this, evidently, perhaps a notification glitch?
I don't know the specific location of his property, but they provide us with, from the property appraiser, 500 feet, at least around the property itself. So I don't know if because of the size of the property, it expands it out a little bit further. And then remember, if that line grabs a corner of a piece of property, happen to be a condo or something like that, then it's going to notify everybody within that property. So I haven't looked specifically at the address, but that's generally how it's done. And there were a lot of notices sent out.
Ray?
Could have been the Ukrainians, could have been the Russians, who knows? But,
Okay, Jason, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor?
And, yes, sir.
Just clearly, not that we want to notify people unnecessarily, but clearly, we do want to err on the side of caution, make sure that anyone who might have an interest in a particular project has the opportunity to come and find out that maybe they are more than 500 feet away when they get here, but at least they had the opportunity to be here and speak their mind if they wish to.
I just can understand Mr. Aaron's concerns. It's like, whoa, Publix is coming to this end of the island. Yes, I'm sure so. Well, that you'll be doing a lot of emailing today. Sorry for that inconvenience to you, sir. Okay, any questions for either staff or the applicant? I'd just like to remind everyone today, the only thing that we're doing today is moving this to a second hearing. That's the only action that's being taken. Roxanne, any questions, any comments?
No, I was just leaning forward to move it to a second reading, which I assume would be our first regularly scheduled meeting in January?
It was the 27th.
27th?
The second meeting, Madam Mayor, is being suggested because we'll need time to review any traffic modifications that may
Do
be.
you have that date that I could put it in my motion?
27th.
27th.
21st, right?
I know.
21st?
Okay, maybe 21st.
Okay.
And there was something about 5 PM. What was that, Jason?
So the state law, basically for notification, says that you have to have a supermajority vote to hold it at a time other than after 5 PM. When you're adding, and that's other than after, it's required after 5 PM.
The meeting is
The
required
meeting
to
is
take place?
unless the jurisdiction votes by a supermajority. That's when you're adding uses and changing a zoning district, and technically a CPD. This CPD is its own zoning district, which is why we had the advertising issue. It's specific and very unique to adding a use like liquor store or pharmacy to this district. Since the district has been established, I know it's a CPD, there's a lot of them, but they're all unique. When you change the uses specific to those, you have to supermajority. So if it's a 5-0 to go to 9, just make sure 9 AM is part of the vote.
The motion.
The motion, excuse me.
But then at a 9 AM hearing, would that vote have to be a supermajority?
No.
No, it's
Oh,
just for
it's
the
just to-
hearing to be other than after,
Got
other
it.
than an evening meeting, has to be a
Okay.
supermajority vote.
Got it. There you go, Roxanne.
I've heard two different things. The sentence I'm reading, a time earlier than 5 PM requires a supermajority vote. So that means if we set it at 9 AM, we would be required to have a supermajority
You have
vote.
to have 4 affirmative votes for your motion.
To set it.
To set the meeting, not
Not to pass
Not the CPD.
Do not need a
It does-
supermajority.
That's not how that reads, of course.
You do not need a supermajority
that's
if
not
you're
what
going to
that
set it
says.
after 5 o'clock. Other than 5 o'clock, if you're going to have it in the morning, you have to have a supermajority vote
To set the meeting.
to set the meeting.
not
To
to pa- Okay.
set the meeting. It's for advertising purposes only.
That is so
Okay,
weird.
so what I'm going to do is turn to the town attorney and say, is it okay if I make a motion to set it at 9 AM on the 21st?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so moved.
There's a motion to set this for a second public hearing, ordinance 1914, for a second public hearing on the 21st of January at 9 AM. And the motion was made by Rick Sand. Is there a second for that motion?
Second it.
Okay, Bruce, if you'll log in. There's a second. And now I will call the roll call vote. So Rexanne, your vote?
Aye.
Bruce, your vote?
Yes.
Ray, your vote?
Aye.
Joanne?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So this will go to a second hearing in January on the 21st at 9 AM. Thank you all for being here. I could just say, gentlemen who spoke, those of you who spoke about this, the 21st will be important for you to be here. Okay? Thank you, folks, very much. Does someone needs to record their vote? It says waiting on Ray Murphy. Okay. Anybody? Yes, thank you all very much. Would anyone like a 5-minute break? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. It's 10:02. No plastic bags, Publix. No plastic. 16, amending Chapter 34, Division 17 of the Land Development Code. This is about fences. And go ahead, Sarah.
Morning, Sarah Probst, Community Development. This is an LDC issue discussion regarding fences. One of the issues that we've come across in our review of the Land Development Code is that fences in front yards are only permitted to be 42 inches in height. That's not a standard fence height, and it also doesn't meet the pool code requirement. So if there is a right-of-way beside a property and there's a pool in the rear yard, they can't have a fence within that first 25 feet that's more than 42 inches tall, so it doesn't meet the Pool Code Safety Act. We've been, I believe, doing administrative variances occasionally for this, but that's not really how administrative variances are supposed to work. So we were proposing a change to the code to allow fences within the right-of-way frontage to be 48 inches in height. And we also proposed a few other minor changes. One has to do with site visibility. That would be requiring that fences and right-of-way frontages be 8 feet back from the pavement. In most instances, that's going to be within a front yard. It's going to be almost on the property line, depending on the right-of-way. In some instances, property lines go right up to that paved area, and in other instances, they're set back off it. But that 8 feet would allow cars to scoot forward without being into the right-of-way so that they could see if people were riding bikes, if there were children, if there were animals. So it would be a visibility issue. The other item is including hedges in the text. Right now, we include that in a figure in that section of code, but we don't actually refer to hedges. And also disallowing slats and material on fences to provide screening unless it's temporary.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah? Roxanne?
I have a question on packet page 245, just above the middle. It appears you're deleting. We prior had a restriction against using chain link in a front yard, and I wondered why we were choosing to delete that.
Oh, this was an item that was brought up by one of the LPA members. It was repetitive. It already included the disallowance of chain link and right-of-way frontages in another section of code that I'm having a hard time.
Page 244, perhaps? Underlined segment?
No.
Oh.
Yes, it's being
Oh, it
yes.
is in C. It says chain link and wire fences are not permitted in front yards. So it was deletion of some repetitive language at the request of an LPA member.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne, questions?
Yes. On page 247, I would suggest on the number B, which is about second, third item from the bottom, with regard to entrance gates may be placed on private property not subject to any access easements in order to control access. And it says adequate stacking. I think we need to be more specific. I happen to have one of those access gates on my property. It was there when I purchased it. I know when I went in for a change in a fence permit along the way, they had it be 25 feet from the right-of-way so that you could stack 1 or 2 cars if your gate isn't functioning or they don't open automatically with your remote control. You have to turn in and you have to wait. So otherwise, your car is sitting across the sidewalk. So I think we need to say no less than 15 feet or no less than, I think we need to not just say adequate stacking. We need a distance. A typical car is at least 15 feet. A pickup truck is more like 20 feet.
I think what we've been requiring is 18 feet. Do you have a recommendation?
No, I think that would be great. I think it's appropriate according to what you think, but I think it needs to be there in number B. It shouldn't just say adequate stacking. It should be a specific number.
I guess I would suggest if you're going to use 18 feet that you say at least 18 feet because there may be circumstances where in a large development that there would be a larger backup.
And then my only other comment, and this isn't, I otherwise am happy with the wording. My only other comment, though, is that with the Becerra Boulevard project now, have some sections complete and others hopefully before too long. What we have are a lot of fences that have been in place for a while that do not meet these standards, and even some that have the automatic gate that are right at the edge of the right-of-way. So I'm thinking that we probably need to send courtesy letters to those who have currently non-compliant fences. See if we can either get them into compliance or let them be aware that any change, maintenance, or whatever will require meeting code. It's just a comment. I notice it all the time as sections are complete, I realize, oh, this would not be allowed now, but since it used to appear to be so far away from the right-of-way.
Okay, I can speak with code enforcement and let them know that we may need to send out courtesy letters. It's not something that we're going to enforce unless changes
Right.
occur, but they should be aware, yes.
Yeah, good. I think people need to keep it in mind in their design planning or whatever, so, thank you.
Sarah, I think that letter needs to be well-phrased because I'm going to bring that same issue, well, I'll talk about it when I speak. Bruce, any questions?
Yeah. So the 18 feet for the gate, is that really necessary in neighborhoods that are not on Estero Boulevard?
I think it is. If you think about if you had a neighbor ahead of you in the road, and, you know, if cars are coming the opposite direction and their car is sitting in the road, who knows how long that car is going to be sitting there in the road if they can't get their gate to open. I think that it's a safety hazard to have cars that may not be able to get into their property, and other cars may not recognize that they've stopped. I think that it's important that they get off the road.
Counselor, the question is, do we write a lesser number into the code, or do we let that person come before you and show that a smaller distance would not impact traffic on their particular street? So I think that's the question at hand.
How do you do that?
They would come in and ask for a variance if they felt they had 17 feet or a lesser number, that they felt that their street had such light traffic that it wouldn't adversely impact their neighbors, and that would be before you to consider as part of a variance request.
So would that have to come to town council and they have to pay the fee to come talk to council, or is that can be done administratively, like it's a cul-de-sac, which is a dead end?
Well, that's up to you all to decide whether, if it's, let's just pick a number, if it's 12 feet, you know, between 12 and 18, that the staff can look at it, make a decision. If it's less than 12, it has to come before council. You could set that parameter.
I guess I don't see why it has to come before council.
Then you can make it administrative for lesser amounts, and staff will decide if that's your preference.
Unless there amounts not on Estero Boulevard, or?
Yes, that would be,
I just wanted to clarify your thought.
right.
I wouldn't oppose that.
Okay, so then, what's the magic number about 48 inches? Why is it not 60 inches?
The Pool Code Safety Act, I don't remember the exact name of it. It's a state regulation regarding pool safety. Your fence has to be a minimum of 48 inches. There are certain requirements for distance between slats and height.
Right, I got that,
and-
but I mean, if somebody want to have a 5-foot fence, what's the problem with that?
Our code currently doesn't allow a 5-foot fence in a right-of-way setback or within 25 feet of a waterway and a rear yard. We were just bringing the front yard into compliance with rear yard allowances and the Pool Safety Act. If you were in favor of increasing the allowed fence height, we could do that. We were just sort of resolving this issue regarding the Pool Safety Act.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, that certainly does need to be resolved. Just some people have mentioned to me that they thought having a 48-inch maximum was problematic if they had big dogs, and just trying to contain the dog.
That's not the maximum.
No, I think that gets into our conversation, though, about view corridors and open space or whatever, when we start having the larger fences and everything. I think that's probably part of the concern, so mention that in passing.
Tell me about hedges, and what's the difference with the hedges now?
Currently, the code includes a figure, let me find it. It's figure 34, it's labeled 3429, it's actually 3428, so I corrected that. It actually shows a fence and a hedge together. The language in the code doesn't refer to that hedge, though. It was our belief that the intent was that the hedge should match up with the fence height based on the way that was shown. So we included hedge in the language so that now if someone is installing a continuous hedge in addition to or in replacement of a fence, that the requirement would be the same height as the fence requirements. And that's for view corridor purposes.
Front yard?
It'd be front yard. I mean, this makes hedges match up with fences in whichever instance they're applied. So if it was in the rear yard along a waterway, it would be 48 inches. If it were in a front yard within a right-of-way setback, it would be 48 inches. If it were in a location where the fence is permitted to be 6 feet tall, it would be 6 feet tall. It would just be matching the same height if it's a continuous hedge.
That's problematic.
Yeah, we've got, every property on the island's got landscape bigger than that, you know, Areca's and whatever, and I have a concern.
Oh, yeah. there's
Well,
some
that,
people- yeah.
absolutely, they're a
Yeah.
wall.
Yep.
Well, they
Go
may
down the
operate
hill,
that
yeah.
way, but I don't know if they fit the definition of a hedge.
I think, I mean, we're talking about vegetation that's from the ground up. I think if it's a palm, there, you know, it doesn't have vegetation all the way up. It's got a trunk and leaves at the top. I don't think that we would necessarily consider that to be a hedge. I don't know that we have a good definition of hedge in our code, so that may be something that we should work on. Or if you don't think that this could be included, we can take it out. We would need to change the figures if that were the case.
Jason Green, just remember that when you're talking about the waterfront property, as Tara said, with the view corridors, it's the 48 inches for being opaque, and then there's a maximum percentage that's got to be open and be able to see through it, right? When we're talking about fences on the water side. It didn't seem to make sense when they showed the figure to include the hedges and the vegetation, and then if you think about somebody could take down a fence and circumvent that rule of creating those view sheds open by growing a 6-foot hedge. So that's why we're trying to match them. But again, if, and as Sarah said, other vegetation can achieve that opacity limits, but.
Are you talking about the 25-foot setback from the seawall sort of thing, or are you talking about more
Right,
than
so
that?
on the side, the 25 feet, you have, it's 48 inches, and anything above that has to have a limit on how opaque it can be. I think it's 25% opaque is the max. So usually what you end up with is like the thin steel kind of wrought iron type fences, so you could, those match right at about 25%. Trying to achieve that same condition through vegetation, because basically people can circumvent that language in those view sheds by growing hedges. They can replace their fence and grow a 6-foot hedge and then block somebody's view. So we're just, and it's been implemented both ways in the past. We've been implementing it this way consistently, but the code has not matched that. Yes, I know, it's a.
So if you've got a hedge that's 48 inches tall, 15 feet from the seawall, that's okay. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And you could build, and you could put some of these examples of like figure, which one's this? In the 28, the bottom right, that's an example of instead of a wall, that could be a hedge at 48 inches, and then you could have the open fencing above that. So you could still do a combination of the two and meet it. The problem is the full opaque white, hedges are basically circumventing the fence code.
I don't have a big problem with that because of destroying someone's view. But if you get beyond that and you're trying to get separation from the house next to you because you've only got 7-foot setbacks and you want to have a privacy wall made out of areca palms or whatever kind of plants there are, I think that's should be allowed.
But the 42 is only limited in the front, is that not correct?
Well, the 48 right now is waterfront. I think what you're talking about is maybe the 25 feet is the wrong number then, perhaps, that maybe it's 15.
Talking about side.
Right, so the side yard 25 feet back from that seawall is where this regulation applies. So my thought has always been, why 25 feet, why not 15?
Well,
I don't know the
because I
magic
asked
number.
Sarah the question about, well, what about the rest of it? Because the rest of it is a 6-foot-high fence, right?
Correct.
So if you've got a 9-foot-high hedge, you're saying that's in violation.
Technically, yes.
That's technically a problem.
But what we're trying to address is the 25 feet in the view sheds right now. We don't really go around measuring their hedges. Fences come in for permits. That's why we know how tall those are.
Can I ask a question? How is that different from waterfront on the Gulf of Mexico then, and relating to the coastal construction line? Because people are built right up to the coastal construction line, so they put their landscape usually right up to the end of the coastal, edge of the coastal construction line for the privacy between structures.
Because your 50 feet setback from the water line is, you almost
It's already
you almost
in
never
place,
meet. Yeah, you almost
yes.
never meet it. Correct.
And I just wanted to clarify that
Yep,
for
that's a
the
good point.
record. Thank you.
Any other questions, Bruce?
I just have one more, thank you. On page 245, E, it says structural integrity must not be compromised to the point that the fence could present a danger of flight or destruction during high winds. And the reason I mention this is because I had a neighbor who was putting in a fence, and he went through a lot of rigmarole down here to be allowed to put enough concrete in it to keep the post up, because the fence manufacturer said this is what you need to be able to do for this fence to withstand storms and stuff. And he had to fight, quote unquote, City Hall to get that done. So this seems to imply to me that that you want to be able to anchor it, yet in reality, in his case, he had problems with that.
So what we have run into is a conflict, I guess I would call it, between your normal, what you said, the anchoring of the fence for wind loads, and then your V-zone and flood zone standards. Flood zone standards don't want buried concrete anchored structures that'll then become basically a barrier to the waves and disperse waves to another structure. They have to fail. So it's finding that balance between anchoring it for the normal wind loads, and then also you want it to fail under a flood conditions. So we've kind of come to basically the 2 feet or less of concrete for fences in a V-zone, or no concrete if their fence manufacturer allows it. And then obviously in an A-zone, they don't have that issue, so they are allowed to put the normal anchors for the concrete. So wind versus flood waters, that's the conflict. They don't always match. They compete with each other.
Want the fence to fail so what would be washed against your neighbor's property and go
You want
through
you want it to fall down and break up, so that it doesn't become, because imagine if a 100-foot long fence came out of the ground, and so we're actually talking with people on a regular basis of making sure that it's not a complete section that'll stay together, because that could wrap around pilings in the bottom of a home and become the force of the waves and debris, and that's what you don't want. You want it to come. You want it to fall down when it floods in a major flood storm, and you want it to break up into pieces. That goes with any structure that you put in a V-zone. You want it to come out of the ground, so it's not a wall, a barrier, so it's not anchored forever permanently, so that it doesn't withstand the flood, because then that can disperse the waves to other structures also. So that's what basically the NFIP talks about, is failing and breaking up.
The rest of my case.
Any other questions? Mr. Murphy, any other questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
So Sarah, and Jason, I just want to touch back on the letter. So I'm one of those people that I have a 6-foot front fence in my front yard. And it actually seems higher than that now. When they did the road went down. And so now my fence seems really high. It's the same height, but it seems higher because the road's lower. So if I were to get one of, it shouldn't say, the letter shouldn't say warning, or you're going to have people freak out, because they already are with, am I going to be able to keep what I have? I have a 6-foot fence in my front yard. It was there, it's been there forever. And so I think that has to be very carefully noted. So is the rule that so let's just say that we have a storm and one section of my fence or anybody's fence is broken or knocked down. Are we allowed to replace it?
Yes,
if I can-
but not under the current applicable code.
So
Come into
the answer is no.
compliance,
You'd have, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that I think your house is one of those houses where your front yard is a side yard. In your neighborhood, we have lots of those, and your fence doesn't go across the whole entire front yard. It's like I said, it's one of those front yards that's a side yard. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
They're nodding. So I think the front yard thing is flexible.
I think the good thing to point out here, though, is we don't have a front yard versus a side yard in our code. We have a right-of-way frontage, so anything that's adjacent to the right-of-way is considered that. And then if it's not adjacent to the right-of-way, then it's either a rear yard or a side yard.
And the opacity is the issue, too. I mean, I know for many.
So no repairs, nothing could be done to that structure. That's what you're telling me.
Typically, what we have told people in these instances is that they would need to come in for a variance.
Okay. I now understand what people are upset about, because that wouldn't have been my answer to that question. Okay, any other discussion or questions?
So on the front yard, well, if you're within 8 feet of the right-of-way or the front yard on Estero Boulevard, what was it? If you were in 8 feet of the,
If you're on Estero Boulevard, you can't be within 3 feet of the sidewalk or a bike path or the right-of-way, depending on which is in front of your property at Estero Boulevard. Any other side street, it's 8 feet from the actual pavement, because most of them don't have sidewalks.
let's
And
talk
there's no.
Estero Boulevard.
Okay.
All right. So I'm on Estero Boulevard. If I've got a sidewalk, I can't have anything within 3 feet of the sidewalk, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, so within that, I'm at 3.5 feet from the sidewalk. I'm only allowed a 42-inch fence, 48-inch fence or hedge?
It would depend on your zoning district, actually, because it has to do with what your primary structure setback is. So within that right-of-way frontage setback, you're not allowed to have anything over 42 or 48, if this were adopted. If you're in downtown, you don't have much of a required front yard, so it would automatically go into the side yard. So you'd be potentially permitted to have a taller fence closer to the right-of-way in a downtown district, because the right-of-way frontage, the right-of-way setback is less. If you're talking about just a residentially zoned property.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it. Keep
Okay.
it simple.
Yeah, yeah, so if you wanted to have a 42-inch fence 3 feet from the sidewalk, you would be permitted to have that.
48-inch with the adoption of this.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so does hedges apply to that too?
It would if this were adopted. The way we are currently looking at the code, we do implement it that way. If you're not interested in including hedges in the language or that figure, that could be removed.
I think somebody needs to think about this real hard, because there's a lot of hedges on Estero Boulevard right next to the sidewalk that are 10, 12 feet plus.
So just to touch on that point, because remember, you have a visibility triangle requirement that's currently in the code that requires in that triangle, you can't have anything over 3 feet or below 8, or above 2 feet below 6. So it basically, thin, narrow trees potentially could be in there if you can have a line of sight, but that solid hedge is not supposed to be over that 2 feet anyway. That's not the entire frontage of the property, but a small property, narrow property, generally, the whole property is touched by the visibility triangle. So we're really not, it's almost matching those two up. What's happened is a lot of hedges have grown beyond that. We haven't enforced that.
Well, I'm not against what you're proposing, and there's a lot of properties that I feel ought to be trimmed way back right now. but I haven't been waving a flag about it, waiting till Estero Boulevard gets finished, and then it needs to go back and have a really severe visibility triangle review, and then also this 48-inch rule. It's going to impact a lot of properties.
And we've been dealing with some that are clear line of sight issues, especially pulling out onto Estero. But you're right, we haven't gone property by property.
I agree, Bruce. You make a very valid point, and I am one of those properties on Estero Boulevard. And, you know, the shrubs close to the street, I keep low shrubs and I kind of build them back away from the street. But there are so many because people did utilize the right-of-way prior to it being reused, taken back by Lee County for the sidewalks. And there's a lot of landscape that is bordering on it now that's been temporarily trimmed, and it cannot overhang the sidewalks. People are going to have to be responsible. We want the balance. We love the landscaping, but you've got to leave the sidewalks open for people to utilize them. So hopefully people will voluntarily do that, but I agree we may actually have to do something and remind people with letters and stuff that it needs to be done.
Just an aside, I haven't verified this, but I have heard that Mayor Henderson's bicycle accident, in which he was fairly seriously injured, occurred when his handlebars tangled with a fence. Yes.
I'm really uncomfortable with this notion that we would include this hedge provision, but have it be something that wasn't necessarily enforced. If we're going to say that the fence has to be X amount of, in other words, so for example, my fence breaks in the next storm, I no longer have a 6-foot fence. I replaced the part that broke with 48 inches and I keep the rest, okay? Let's just say that. But if I had 6-foot plantings on the front, and I would be required, if those came out in a storm or for whatever reason, I would have to keep those trimmed to 48 inches. It could be no higher than 48 inches. So when do we put into place, and how do you monitor that with the hedges? I mean, that just seems, the opacity is a little bit easier because, you know, you either can or can't see through it, but I just think that's a nightmare. Okay, anybody have any other questions on this? Any direction on this?
Well, it has to be moved to a second hearing, so we've got more time to work on it, right? Yes. I would move to move ordinance 19-16 to a hearing on, are we setting this the first meeting in January, the second meeting in January?
I'll do the second meeting.
Second meeting, so that's January 21st at 9 a.m.?
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second.
I beat you to it, sorry,
By
Greg.
Joanne, and if everyone would please cast their vote.
And may I just make a comment? Perhaps between now and the next hearing, could we, would the council like a couple of examples of landscaping
Yeah,
or whatever?
I was just going
A
to ask
little
the very,
further.
we need some illustrations.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, now we'll move on to the administrative agenda, which,
Clarification, did you mean pictures, like actual photos or illustrations?
both.
Just any code that relates to that, and just all in one spot with a couple of illustrations or whatever. Would be great. They don't have to be great sketches, they can be.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 1940, correcting Scribner's errors in Ordinance 1908, calling for the election.
Move approval of the resolution, Madam Chair.
Well, I guess I'll second it, but I have a question. But
Go ahead, Rexanne.
Well, we haven't had our motion and second pop up, but okay.
Because I can't get it to open. There we go. Okay.
My question was that we're doing this because we learned that there was a 75-word limit, and I just wondered, John, is that a state statute? Is that a local?
It's a state statute, and there were also some other scrivener's errors that the supervisor of election pointed out, primarily due, actually, the singular versus plural, because the original draft of the ordinance was one singular proposal, and at the council's direction, we split it up, and some changes to the language where it was singular in nature had to get changed to plural. And we then expanded the language on the second proposal to reflect that it was being tied to the first proposal. And the supervisor of elections pointed out the 76 word limitation under state statute, and so this is the change that we are proposing.
Is that 76 words a new thing?
I'm sorry?
Is that a relatively new thing, or has it been around for a while?
Upon confirmation and conversation with the supervisor of elections, it's been around for some time, and it just wasn't caught at the staff level, including by myself. But we have corrected it, and the ordinance specifically provides for this type of modification by resolution.
Thank you. I've marked my second.
Okay, any other questions or conversation on this?
Yes, I just wanted to make comment for the public and for newspapers, et cetera, that in our packet page 263, 264, 265, this information, I think, how are we going to disseminate this well to the public so they understand that some votes mean some terms to be extended or not extended, there's, depending upon how you vote and how things pass, I think this information needs to be made clear to the public somehow, and starting in January probably, over the course of the 2 months prior to the election, how will we disseminate this well?
I plan to hand it to our PIO.
There you go.
I was thinking along those same lines, Joanne, and I was wondering if the council itself didn't want to make a recommendation as to these points, particularly with the outgoing members who this won't affect. In other words, if the three of you or two of you, whatever it is, leaving, join with the two that were remaining in favor of these charter changes, it might make an impression, or not. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make up your mind, but if it were a unanimous feeling of the council, and particularly again with the outgoing members, that it might make an impression on the people of the town themselves, or not do it and have the members do it individually themselves. But it would certainly speak volumes if the council spoke as one voice, I would think.
Well, from my point of view, I probably would not be part of a unanimous voice on this issue, so and I've expressed that previously, from my point of view, but I feel like our best role is to provide information so people understand exactly what, if you vote yes on both, this happens, if you vote yes on this and no on this, this happens, if you vote da-da-da, in a very, as simple a chart as possible. So you can
Yes,
see two yes votes means this, 2 no votes means this, a yes on this and a no means that, no on that, yes on this means that, because there's 4 possibilities. Roll the dice 4 different ways, and this is what results in each. And as clear a chart as possible, I think, is what we need. And this is a great chart, but in a way, I think
Very
it'd be even.
confusing. For somebody who doesn't know anything that's going on, they look at that and they go, what?
So it's almost like yes on this and yes on this gives you this. Yes on no on this and no on this gives you this. Yes on this and no on this gives you this, and no on this and yes. In other words, 4 charts. Do you know what I mean? And I can put that together. But at any rate, I think starting in January, I won't labor it. We need to start letting the public know that so they have a good conversation on it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and everyone, if they will, cast their votes, and the motion carries unanimously, and we're going to take another quick break.
Okay.
It's 10:52 and, or it's 10:53, and we're back. The next item on the agenda is the Raftelis rate study relative to water, stormwater, and impact fees. Mr. Hernstadt. Or Christie, either way, whoever wants to start.
Madam Mayor, I'll start. As stated on the blue sheet, through the passage of time and the accumulation of actions taken since we undertook the stormwater and water projects, it seems appropriate to staff that in light of the policies that this council and prior councils have enacted, it's time for us to do a study of our rates to make sure that we can meet all our obligations. And I will mention that a review of the impact fees is included, but could be bifurcated and not be done, and that would bring the projected contract amount down to $79,790 if that's the council's decision.
Could you repeat that? What you
It
just
would
said?
reduce it by approximately $15,000 to $79,790
If what is removed?
if
Impact
the
fees.
impact fee analysis is removed.
Thank you.
Okay, Christie, anything to add?
No, ma'am.
Any questions? Roxanne?
Did we get bids from anybody else for this service?
So this firm has been used previously to do our studies that we've had in place, and we believe that their familiarity with the town's rates gives them an advantage in terms of being able to perform the study. But if the council prefers, we can go back out. Typically with these studies, it's not a bid upon thing. You pick the firm based on their qualifications, not based on the price. But if that's what the council would like us to do, we can go back out.
This is usually a Bruce type of question, so I'll look to Bruce as to what he thinks.
You know what they charged last time?
Last time, they did a mini study for us to determine whether or not we could reduce the rate 1 year because the delay in the state beginning the debt service payments. And if my memory serves me correctly, that was approximately $20,000 and resulted in us dropping the rate for one specific year from the 7% recurring increase to 5%.
That wasn't a complete study.
That was not a top to bottom review study. I will remind the council that over the passage of time, our ERU count is decreased to 4,737. Our number to pay the debt service is 4,700 ERUs. So our cushion was 37 ERUs, and then, as you all well know, you all made a decision with respect to the maintenance, and the 37 surplus ERUs would not cover that recurring expense.
Other questions? Joanne?
Yeah, if you don't mind, can we each take one of these? Within the study, it's just one copy each. I'm trying to make it easy so you grab them quick. Within the study, I think it's important to evaluate the ERU stormwater rate with and without the general fund support of maintenance. And what you'll see on this is actually, you'll notice I highlighted at the bottom, this is Jim Steele, December of 2016. You know, we all passed the third amendment to the stormwater, which allows general fund to be used for maintenance. I just want you to look and see that Jim Steele said that the stormwater utility, the general fund will pay maintenance and the billing cost. And then stormwater utility will start paying some maintenance costs starting in 2033. And the stormwater utility will be able to pay the full maintenance cost starting in 2040. And the decision to make that a loan from the general fund instead of the intent as it was planned, which is allowed in the ordinance and was planned, because these are all, the stormwater, you know, whether you're a user or not, everyone on the island owns the system, just like we own Town Hall, we own the streets, we all own those things. And the maintenance is by state statute and by ordinance allowed to come out of the general fund. And I think it's real important that this study shows what's going to happen to the stormwater fee if that decision is continued to use that as a loan as compared to make that be the payment that it was intended to be for maintenance. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Ray, questions?
That's well and said, but I don't know what it has to do with this resolution before us right now.
Well, because the rate study is going to show what our ERUs and rates are going to wind up being. And part of it is you need to see if you don't use the general fund and we only have 37 ERUs supporting the stormwater, what's that rate going to have to increase if you're letting other property owners on the island who own the system and don't pay the ERU? You're supposed to use the intent was to use the general fund for maintenance. And if you make a decision not to do that, even though it's allowed by the ordinance and by state statute, you're making those user fees go up. And I think it's important the study show the impact of that decision.
Thank you. Roger, is the reason that you proposed it two different ways, leaving the impact fee out of the lower amount, the $79,790, is that because we follow the county impact fees? Was that the reason?
I think the reason why council may want to consider omitting that is the town, for the most part, is built out, and therefore, unless someone's impervious area is going to change dramatically from what they currently have, it wouldn't really be impacted by a increase in the impact fee rates per se. So in light of that, I don't believe that, you know, that's sort of the impetus to do this study or not. It's just really, while they're working with the numbers, clearly there's some cost savings if they were to look at that at this time versus another time in the future. But if you're of the belief that due to the town being pretty much built out and the impervious surface on any particular property is not going to change dramatically from what they currently have, they wouldn't be impacted or affected by an impact fee increase, if that's what the study bore out.
Okay. Well, with that being said, then I would make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into the contract with Raftelis to perform a rate study of the warm water, stormwater impact fees in the amount of not to exceed $79,790 due to the passage of time and certain changes in policy.
Okay, so Ray has made the motion. If you'll push that button, Ray. And is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Rexanne Hossafras. Any further discussion on the motion?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I still am hesitant about this, even though I seconded the motion. I did it to, you know, move the process along. Is time of the essence with this, Roger?
My concern with this is we work very hard in the years that I've been your town manager to make sure that we have a structurally balanced budget. And based on the action that was taken at the tail end of last budget season, we've created a scenario where we have a loan of approximately $300,000.
I agree we need a study. My question is it of the time of the essence? Because I'm wondering if we have time, I'd like to see if anybody would do this for us cheaper. So if time is not of the essence.
Well, let me give you the parameters, and you can decide that as a council whether you feel if it's of the essence or not. At the end of the fiscal year, we're going to have an amount due to the general fund that can't be repaid. and based on the current rate structure, in my opinion. So if you're comfortable with the general fund carrying that unpaid debt, then we can delay this action. I would like to, it was my goal to get it done so you have it for your budget considerations as you begin the budget process in the May-June timeframe. So that's why, and that and familiarity by having worked with the town and worked with our rates in the past is why we're recommending this firm. This is kind of a specialty thing. There's only a handful of firms that do this, but again, I don't know that the effort would be dramatically different from one firm to another, other than a firm less familiar with Fort Myers Beach. Probably we either have to charge more or do it as a loss leader, hoping to get our continuing business in the future.
And I have another question. Would the effort be dramatically different if the $250,000 weren't a loan and had been, as recommended, just been used from the general fund for the maintenance as the ordinance allows and as Jim Steele intended?
I think we would have had to do a rate study again in the future. It's just really been accelerated by that, some of the policies that we've gone through. But also just the fact that the ERU number is down to where we only have a cushion of 37. So I think that's just due to credits and other things that have issued, occurred over time. We're in that position where I would say it's too close for comfort.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second, and we're waiting on Joanne and Bruce.
Sorry.
You have another question?
I
Go
do
ahead.
have a question. So with Rexanne's raised motion, does that include Joanne's concern that it's looked at both ways in terms of maintenance? Because that's what she had asked, that they review it. I think that they do it by having maintenance from the general fund or maintenance through the ERU.
The scope of work includes analysis of the past contributions of other funding sources to the project. So the way I suspect the consultant will write their report to say if you do not use this general fund or secondary gas tax support of the project, this is the impacts. So the short answer is yes. Council Champ's concerns, I believe, are addressed in the scope of work.
So Joanne brought us this work, which I remember that Jim Steele did. I don't remember that we had a rate study when Jim was here. He, in effect, did it for us. Am I in error to say that?
I think you're correct.
So would it be possible we could get a bid from Jim Steele? I'm thinking he'd charge less than $70-some thousand.
Well, I think the dilemma is, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jim and his capabilities. If Raftelis does it and the council has questions about it, you're going to go to the audit committee and Jim Steele to ask for their opinion about the results you're going to see. If Jim does it, who do we go to do that review?
Well, he's only one member of the audit committee.
I understand. The other thing is, I suspect that a rate increases may result, be part of that recommendation. And, I would feel comfortable with a third party, putting that forth.
Okay, you're standing by your people, period.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, to the question raised by Councilmember Hasselfrost, when this item first came through the minute track for my review, I asked the same question because it just came with the task that is the first couple of pages, the Raftelis letterhead, and I inquired as to why wasn't this being put out to bid. And staff pointed to me, and it's in the packet now, at my request, the 2016 agreement that did result in an abbreviated study. It does provide for additional work and to be tasked under this, and therefore it can be used. But if it's the council's direction to go out to proposal, certainly we can do that as well.
I'm going to withdraw my second merely because this computer does not allow me to second a motion and then vote against it. So I'm withdrawing my second. Somebody else can jump in if you're feeling that you feel comfortable with
I don't
this.
know that, okay. Did you just cancel the vote, Amy? It canceled itself, okay.
It still has 3 yes votes showing.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
Well,
so-
somebody has to second, is what I'm saying.
Yes, but the system is not letting us do anything at this point now.
Well, we can just do
That's right.
old-fashioned way.
We'll do it the old-fashioned way. That'd even be better. Okay, so there is a motion. Is there a second for this? There's no second for the rate study at 79,790.
Oh, and I'm tell you why. I think we need to reverse that decision on the 250,000 and then do a rate study on the other things that need to be done. I feel strongly about that. This is spending more money because of a decision that was made that the whole basis of the ERUs is now undermined and the whole plan moving forward. So I have to vote no.
Well, my vote is for a different reason than Joanne's. I do think we need to do a rate study, but I believe it would be appropriate for us to seek other bids.
Bruce, how do you feel?
I agree with Rexanne.
You agree with Rexanne? Then let's vote no against this, okay? So, Ray, would you like to change your motion? Or you want to keep your motion?
No, I'll change it. I can see,
You're gonna
I
withdraw
can
it.
see where it's going. That's fine. I mean, if you want to get another bid or whatever, that's, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so basically, I need a motion to deny the request to enter into this contract.
So moved. I move to deny the request and request that the town manager seek other bids for this work.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second it.
Motion made by Rexanne, seconded by Bruce. Is there anyone who opposes this motion?
I do.
Then the motion passes 4-1. Okay, next item on the agenda, Evolve Tech contract. This is to renew the annual contract for Evolve Tech for $102,300. Are there any questions on this? Bruce, any questions? Ray, any questions?
No.
Rexanne?
There are no questions. It's a necessary evil in today's society.
Joanne, any questions?
No, I'd just make a comment. You know, we're in the process of rebuilding the system, and I think we are frustrated at being in the middle of that process, but we need to keep moving forward and get to the other side, so I support this.
Roger, my one concern is what guarantees or insurance or anything do they offer should we utilize their service and the town get hacked anyway?
Well, there's no guarantee.
Okay.
But I will tell you that we've implemented a penetration test as part of our procedures. That's where we have outside entity trying to penetrate our system. As a result of that, we received some recommendations, which we have implemented. And we continue to do everything that we can possibly do by way of anticipation to protect the integrity of our system.
Okay. All right. So is there a motion, please, to approve this contract?
I'll move to approve.
A motion from Rexanne and a second by Joanne. And is there any objection to this motion? It passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the Upland Mooring Field. And this is to execute professional service agreement for the upland services for the town mooring field with Matanzas Inn.
I'll move approval of that services.
I'll second.
agreement.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. And is there any discussion on this?
Only discussion would be that, you know, I've talked to the service provider, and he understands the comments made by the chair of the AAC, and there may be a little room for movement on those concerns, so.
Excellent.
And we appreciate that, so thank you.
That's great news.
Support the motion.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second, waiting on Joanne and Bruce to log their votes, but doesn't appear to be any objection. The motion carries unanimously. The next item is the Connecticut Street sidewalk maintenance, and this is to authorize a transportation off-system post-project maintenance agreement, that's pretty fancy, with FDOT for the maintenance of the Connecticut Street sidewalk.
Move approval of the agreement, Madam Chair.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Murphy, and is there a second by Joanne? Is there any discussion or questions on this?
I guess I'd just like to understand why,
Roger?
just briefly.
Briefly.
I'm not against
Very,
it, I just.
very, yeah, shortly, these types of agreements, you know, the state will build it, but you have to maintain it prospectively. So that's.
So this is standard operating procedure.
For the state, for these off-system improvements, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second, and the motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a lien reduction request, and this is a lien reduction request for code enforcement cases CE 16-0150, CE 16-051, and CE 18-0246. There is legal counsel here present. Normally, on administrative agendas, we don't take any input, but with the approval of the council, does anyone object to the council speaking on behalf of her client?
I have no objection, but I have a point of order question.
Sure.
When I read the packet, it seemed like this lien reduction and the one after were intertwined,
It does appear that way.
and it would make sense maybe to do them together. If,
Is there a reason why they're separated on the agenda?
They were submitted separately as the applicant submitted them separately.
but there, John, there's no problem with us
No.
doing them both together
No.
so that we can ask questions and understand how they fit together?
No, I will point out, as set forth in the blue sheet, is that of the three that have been mentioned, two of those code enforcement cases, sorry,
150 and 151, I think, are the
yes,
two you're referring to.
have previously been heard, and under your code, the town manager automatically rejected those, and so procedurally, you have to listen to the applicant to see whether or not there's even good, if they show good
Right.
cause for them to be considered.
If we hear them together, I understand we need two separate motions to
Yes.
tie them off.
But you want to talk about both of them so you can have a broader picture?
Right.
Okay, so with no objection, how are you, Sarah? Merry Christmas.
Oh, I like to think I'm taller than I am, sorry.
We all do.
Sarah Spector with Retzel and Andrus on behalf of the applicant. Just to address council members Hassafras's comments, the application was submitted, or applications were submitted before I had been retained, and hence the supplemental information that was submitted. And actually, 149, 150, and 151, all three 2016 code matters are probably most appropriately handled together, with the 18 handled separately. But as you might have seen if you did review the supplemental information, they're all kind of intertwined. And I wanted to apologize in advance for how convoluted and complicated this is and how much supplemental information I had to provide to explain, I think, explain what I understand to have happened. I do have a visual up on the screen, but I also have printed copies, if you wouldn't mind me passing them out.
Not at all. If you'll just give them to Amy, she'll
Sure.
pass them on to us, Sarah. Thank you.
And I guess I should have asked, am I limited to 3 minutes, since I know this isn't typical? Okay.
We'll be a little generous with you, but
I'll try, like I said, I tried to summarize everything in the supplemental information. I just
Thank you
wanted
for
to
that.
highlight a few points. With respect, as your council has mentioned, there were two code matters that were previously considered by you for lien mitigation. I recognize that your code does provide that if those reduced amounts are not paid within 30 days, it goes back to the original amount. We would request, with the complexity of this matter and the history of this matter, that they be reduced slightly to account for some of the facts in this case. Specifically, what happened here is the applicant purchased the property in 2015. They had purchased the property with the intent to remodel the property in its entirety. The application was submitted in 2015 for that entire project, and the applicant proceeded with that permit application with the understanding that it was being processed and would be issued so that the remodel could take place. As I think in two of the cases, I had provided you with the inspection report. The inspection report did show that there was roof damage and porch damage that needed to be fixed, to the point where with the roof, the house was being flooded on rain events, and the porch was not safe for purposes of entering the home. So while those applications were being processed, or the main remodel permit was being processed, the work was done to fix those issues, and additionally, a paver driveway was added to allow for access to the home. So that work was done in 2016 before the remodel permit was issued. When it was clear that the remodel permit was not going to be issued, and the reason for that appears to be there was disagreement between the town and the applicant regarding whether the remodel exceeded the 50% provision of the code that does not allow you to exceed 50% of the value of the home in improvements. The applicant did go in for permits after getting the code violations to cure the after-the-fact issues regarding the roof, the patio in the front, and the driveway. And so I just wanted, there's many mentions of different things. They're called different things in all the different code cases. So I did want to point out what I'm talking about when I refer to those first three items. If you'll see in green, the green is the driveway that is mentioned in Code Enforcement Case 16-015. The yellow is the front porch, which is addressed in Code Case 16-151. And then while I've highlighted the entire base structure of the house, really 149 is solely with respect to a patch job on the roof. The roof was not replaced on the entire home, and I did include a picture with the package that shows, you can see in the property appraiser's aerial, that's a very small portion of the roof that was patched solely to keep the house from flooding. So those are the three areas that were addressed in 2016. As I mentioned, there were building permits that were submitted subsequent to the remodel permit because the remodel permit was not progressing. When the applicant submitted the subsequent permit application, it was his understanding that it was covering all three areas, the green, yellow, and pink. So when that was issued and closed out, because the work had already been done, there was no work that needed to be done after the permit was issued, the applicant was of the understanding that all three issues had been addressed. Unfortunately, it wasn't discovered until many months later. This was in July and August that the permits on the driveway and the porch were closed. It wasn't discovered until November that the roof repair had not been addressed in that initial building permit for the three items. So it was recommended by community development staff at that time that the engineer simply submit a letter saying that that the repairs were done to building code. He did that and thought he was done with all three issues. He did by this time have the issues with the porch and the driveway addressed, but the roof was still outstanding in code enforcement's case log. It was not until many months later that it was discovered that it still hadn't been closed out, and that's when code enforcement came and had mentioned that it needed to be closed out. So the reason for the roof not being closed out until a year after the other two is just, it was mere misunderstanding between staff and the owner of the home that it wasn't included in the original permit. So our request on the first three, again, just the 2016 permits, is that because they are after the fact permits and no additional work was needed, that the fine actually stop on the day that the permits were issued, which is substantiating the request for the slight reduction in 150 and 151, which are the two code cases that you had already approved lien mitigation on. And then to stop the code violation on that same day for the roof, since the work had already been done, the permit for the building permit had been issued, and it was merely a misunderstanding that there were still additional closeout items that needed to take place on the roof. So I had the numbers in the requests. For 150, we would request that it be reduced to 5,000. To 150, for 151, we would request that it be reduced to 2,500. And for 149, which is the roof repair, we would request that it be reduced to 5,000.
Is that all, Sarah?
For those three, I have not addressed the 18, so I didn't know if you wanted to discuss those first.
Would you like to go on, or?
Well, 18 is part of 1650 and 1651.
Yep.
It's not really. Those
It
were
is in
already.
our book.
Yeah,
It
it
is
is
in
in
your
our-
book because of the way the application was filed. So if you'd like me to keep going,
Yes.
okay, I can do that. Again, going back to 2015, the applicant's original intention was to remodel the home, and an application was submitted in 2015 for that. And as I had mentioned, and I apologize if I'm being repetitive, the main concern with town staff in issuing the permit was whether the 50% rule the threshold had been exceeded in the work that was being proposed. So many requests for additional information were issued. They were responded to immediately, and the town staff had still questioned whether the 50% threshold had been met. So let me just pull this up because this one's a little more complicated. So for whatever reason, and I had mentioned because that was getting denied, or they were not, the town staff was not issuing the permit, they did submit a separate building permit. So you had the 16 permits for the other issues I already discussed. There's a 17 permit that was submitted for the bathroom addition, which is in blue on the left-hand side of the picture, and then for a roof over an open porch, which is the blue square on the back of the property. So those are the two areas that are covered by this 18, by the 17 permit and by the 18 code enforcement matter. For whatever reason, the 17 permit was being processed, and again, just as the applicant had with the 2015 permit, was responding repeatedly to the request for additional information on the 2017 permit. And then inexplicably, it's unclear in the record why, but staff asked that the 2017 permit be closed and that a new permit needed to be issued, and at the same time asked that the applicant submit a compliance agreement saying that he would bring all of the property, because at this point everything had been constructed, bring all the property into compliance with the code by getting permits by a date certain, which was in September of 2018.
And did he?
No. The pink, yellow, and green had already been addressed back in 2017. With respect to the blue, what had happened was this new permit was issued, or I'm sorry, this new permit application was filed in 2017. Then a code enforcement case was opened while that was still pending, with questions still open on those, on that permit. So for some unknown reason, and I could not make heads nor tails of it in the record, a new permit was filed in 2018 for those same areas in May of 2018. 2017 was voided. Again, very little in the file as to why it was voided. But you can see there's a very long record of the applicant immediately responding to requests for additional information from staff. The applicant's engineer and builder were here almost daily asking what the status was. And again, the notes in the record will reflect that the issue is still the 50%, whether the 50% threshold had been met or they had gone over that 50% threshold. This was going on between May and all the way up through November. So we passed the September date because we were still going back and forth with staff. It finally came down, there's in your packet, you'll see there's a letter from the engineer that basically says, look, we've come in to you 3 times, we've answered every question you have. We need to know what your answer is on this because that's the only thing that's holding it up. And as a result of that letter, there was a meeting in November with the building official, and I apologize, I know it was the building official, I don't want to misspeak and say who else was there, but all the decision makers who then did decide, yes, in fact, they were below the 50% threshold to where this application could be issued. So had it not been for that that back and forth and delay in making that determination, there would have been no issue with meeting that September compliance agreement date. So for that reason, we're asking that that fine be reduced to 0.
Okay, so can we settle these 3? Or Rexanne, do you want to go on further?
I have a question regarding 16-150 and 16-151 are different in that you previously came to council and received a lien reduction and did not pay the amount within the 30 days. Can you tell me why?
I cannot tell you why.
Your client hasn't shared with you, they were in the hospital, they were in a coma, they got a big gift from the town and didn't take advantage of it.
All the other issues were still outstanding, so, and that was the explanation that I was given. So other than that, trying to rectify all the other issues, no, I don't have an answer for you on that. I do recognize what the code provides, and we were just asking for a slight reduction in those 2 fines.
Well, to my fellow council members, I'll say this. This is the way I would go about this. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to offer any lien reduction at all for 150 or 151. It would set a horrendous precedent that I don't think we should start with, and it will simplify matters a great deal if we all agree we're just going to talk about 18-246 and 16-149.
I concur.
Rexanne, let me ask you a question. So no lien reduction, in other words, but you would uphold the original lien reduction?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
they didn't pay it within 30 days. We have a pretty black and white ordinance that says we're wanting to encourage you to pay your liens. So we've given you a reduction and we give you 30 days to pay it. They didn't pay it. And, you know, I would be sympathetic if somebody came in and said, I was in an auto accident, I couldn't get in there in 30 days, I couldn't transfer the funds. But I think it's a horrendous precedent for us to move from that. We've already given them their bite at the apple. They didn't take advantage of it.
It doesn't show an intent to comply or be cooperative with our code. And the town council, I agree, went to the town council staff, went to the time to do this, and they still didn't comply. So I totally agree on that one.
And how do you 2 gentlemen feel about that? Bruce?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I don't, if you're given a chance and you don't take the chance, shame on you.
Ray?
Group on that?
Okay, so, so may I have a motion on CE 160150 and CE 16051?
I would move that CE 16150 remain at $6,800 pursuant to our ordinance, and that 16-151 remain at $3,400 pursuant to our ordinance.
Second.
Okay, so this, Amy, this isn't going to be on this system because it's out of line. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now CE 180246.
I guess I would want to hear from staff if they have anything else to say besides their standard, I think it's a 1/3 reduction kind of thing that they say that they're willing to live with.
Well,
You don't have to add anything, I just wondered whether you
yeah,
had.
I just want to be clear about that. Typically, unless we, through the review of the record, once we receive the application for a lien request, that we find that staff made a mistake, either a human error or a process error, we don't recommend a reduction. However, we do provide, as you mentioned, Counselor, for consistency's sake, if the town feels that there's a hardship or other circumstance, a standard reduction, and that's before you. Of course, you have well within your rights to pick a different number if you feel it's appropriate.
So if we wanted to follow that recommendation, or recommendation is too strong a word. If we want to follow that
Guidelines.
possibility, then the first lien reduction would be to $8,827, and the second one would be $28,542. So we would still have a total lien of over $36,000, $37,000 if we followed that. Just pulling out numbers, it's so complicated, I'm doing this half for my own benefit.
That would be a 33% reduction?
Yes.
We're talking specifically about 180246.
Well, I read them both. I read them both.
Right.
Yes,
160149.
yes, 160149. The 1/3 would be 28,542.
Yeah, on 160149, and on 180246, it would be $8,827.50, correct, Roxanne?
I believe I read. There's so many numbers in here. Well, I'm just reading those numbers so we know where we are. I'm kind of interested in hearing what my fellow counselors have to say about.
May I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Because I'm looking at the staff report as well, and I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the correct numbers. I think the numbers you're saying, not that I just want to make sure I understand, are the reduction, not what will be owed.
Nope,
Leaves a
we were
balance.
wrong. We're
That's the
wrong.
balance.
Oh, wait.
I would prefer it to be
If you
2/3,
look
but
at I read it wrong. I read it wrong. On page 350, I was reading 8,000. The
Oh, yes,
balance
you're
would be
right.
17,922. Thank you for correcting me. I was wrong.
But as a reminder, I'm asking for it to be reduced to 0 on 18,246 solely because the issue was with regard to making the decision on the 50%, and it was through no fault of my clients.
And see,
Pardon me.
yeah. I definitely wouldn't be going to 0.
Do we have?
The
any-
problem is consistently doing work without a permit. This has been several years of this, and coming in for mitigation and then not paying it and then having continued issues.
All permits are
it's a
now
problem.
closed, and it's all on the same project. I know it, because of the permit process, it looks a little different.
So Sarah, you're saying all of the delays relative to the 18 permit were relative to our staff delays and a decision on the 50% rule?
Correct. And I have included exhibits to demonstrate that with that supplemental information that I provided.
A property owner still has the opportunity to wait to do their work with or without a permit. That's what we're here for. That's the issue. I mean, that's the problem.
Yep, that's the problem.
And I mean, it's a good faith on our point to reduce it 33%. That is, a procedure that we have established as a possibility is.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
If I may just make an observation, it's certainly in council's discretion, as the manager indicated, but I think that as staff, based upon my experiences working with your staff, we have a concern about how this is being characterized. Staff delayed this. If you look at the material that's been provided by the applicant that's in the package, you'll see page after page after page of requests for additional information. And so when there's this perception that those are staff delays, I would actually characterize it as the applicant's delay. If they had provided the information, a complete building permit application up front, then there would have been no delay. It was staff going back to the property owner or the applicant on repeated occasions saying, you have yet to provide X information. Please provide it. Without that information, we cannot process your application. And it took that length of time.
And if I may, those letters repeatedly were asking for the cost justification for the 50%. So it was that over and over again, asking for the same information to make a determination on whether the 50% threshold had been met. So yes, we got a number of requests for additional information, but it was for the same information.
Was that information ever submitted?
Yes, there was just a disagreement between staff and the applicant as to whether it did substantiate.
There were
the
other
individual.
requests for additional information besides that. That was part of the problem, but that's not the only time that they were asked for additional information.
Okay. Ray or Bruce, any questions or comments on this?
I would comment that since I'm not real familiar with the case, but from what I'm hearing is that there was a little bit of mistakes on both sides. That's the impression that I'm getting. So my suggestion would be rather than reduce it by 33%, why don't we just split it? Split it with them 50-50 and be done with it.
Any inclination over here on that?
I don't think it's a 50-50 fault issue.
And I disagree. I agree with you, Roxanne.
I mean, literally hundreds of people come in and apply for permits and get them. Somebody's doing things right. It's kind of thumbing your nose in the face of the people who do it right. I guess to move this off center, what I'll do is I'll move to reduce lien CA 18246 to the amount of $17,922.50 and lien CE 16-0149 to the amount of $28,542, which is a third reduction in each of those.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Bruce, any discussion?
I tell you what, I have a difficult time with this. Only because when I went through my 50% thing for my house, I had to get 3 different contractors, 2 different engineers, an architect, and everybody else to come down here to argue with Town Hall about the 50% thing. I mean, it was ridiculous. It took 6 months before we could start, I think. And of course, this was a long time ago. So I empathize with that. However, what we're saying is they did the work without the permit, right? Yes. I didn't do the work without the permit, but I empathize with the situation, so I'll go with the majority.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second for these two cases to reduce them by 33%. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry it didn't work out better, Leo. Okay, next item on the agenda is final public comment.
Nope.
I'm sorry?
We need a vote still.
A vote on?
She's-
What did I miss?
reduction.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. The next item is final public comment.
Nope. I've got more in my book. Oh, no, excuse me, that's a town attorney item, I apologize. I'm
Final
not
pu-
used to having town attorney items in the book.
Final public comment. Anybody want to comment on anything? Seal, Forrest? Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is town manager's items. Mr. Hernstat?
Madam Mayor, and members of the council, I just want to bring two items relating to the state DOT to your attention. One is that the state is embarking on a project to look at I-75 from east of Collier Boulevard, which is State Road 951, to Bay Shore Road, which is State Road 78. There will have a significant PD&E study underway and are welcoming the town and individual citizen and resident and travelers' comments on that. And if you would like to make a comment, we will be more than happy to facilitate gathering those and forwarding them to the state on the public's behalf. So feel free to reach out to us and share any comments you may have about the current lane configuration and how it might be able to be improved.
Roger, what I would like specifically is to support the Village of Estero and the City of Bonita Springs because it's mostly going to impact them. So I don't know what their comments are yet, but I could reach out to the mayors and see if there's anything that should be related back to the council. Anybody have any comments on this?
I would also like to support the village, I always want to call it a town, the Village of Estero and Bonita Springs in their positions.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Anything else?
Yes, one more matter. Lee County DOT is making an application for Sun Trail funding to construct the trail between Estero Boulevard from Big Hickory Pass Bridge to, of course, Big St. Carlos Pass Bridge. And this is part of the statewide trail system. It's approximately 3.25 miles for a non-motorized trail. And of course, they're asking for the town's support. And before we went forward and did that, I just wanted to bring it to your attention and be sure that you're all comfortable with supporting LEDOT's request for funding. And if you do, we will be glad to issue a letter of support.
I'm absolutely in favor of that.
Me too.
Does this go through the
MPO.
state park?
Oh,
Lovers
yes,
Key
it
State
does,
Park?
yes. It certainly does.
It provides access to Lovers Key State Park.
Good, that would be great. Yeah, I'd support it.
And my only concern is in our supporting it, I mean, this is the bikes, right? This is the bike trail?
Yes.
So how does that impact us particularly with our boulevard project, with any regulations that might be different than the way that we see things happening on our boulevard right now? The use of our sidewalks, the use of by bicycles, you know.
It's non-motorized, but the definition of non-motorized is still a little bit up in debate when
What
you
do you
get to
mean?
this, huh?
How could that be debatable?
Because in some places in this, I think in the state, it says that if the vehicle is below X speed, it may not be considered motorized. John, does that sound familiar to you? Do you remember hearing anything like that?
So you can,
Yes.
okay, well, that's interesting.
That's my concern. I mean, the idea is great, but I want to make sure that we aren't, without further study, deciding that, promoting something that may have different impact than what we're thinking.
Well, we can point out in our letter of support that, that we support it, providing that there'll be respect for local ordinance regarding portions that go through the town of Fort Myers Beach. So to the extent that we have local regulation, we'll, hopefully that they'll understand that our support goes with them respecting that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else, Roger?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Hernstat? Oh, Heron, John Heron. Sorry, I'm telling you, I'm not well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We've known that.
Under Town Attorney, there are two items. One is a memorandum and some backup materials regarding the current procedures that the town uses to vacate right-of-way or portions of property that have been platted that are dedicated to the town. And this council struggled with that process in the context of bulk vacating of rights-of-way. And I think that it would be prudent, not only for that type of situation, but any others that come forward in the future, that we streamline our system. If you look at our regulations, which are attached and are included, and as well as what I've distributed, our regulations take up about 4.5 pages of procedures. Some of the examples that I picked randomly, one is less than half a page, and I think the lengthiest one that I provided is 2.5 pages. And they're there for you all to take a look at your convenience and give me some feedback on what you like or dislike about those. And subject to your direction, we'll start working on a revision to the code.
Okay. Any questions on this from anyone?
Yeah.
Yes, Bruce?
So when I look at ours, and I'm reading on packet page 439, it says the original intended use of the real property at the time of the acquisition by the town, and then down below it says the conveyance is back to the original grantor, its successors and signers who are currently the abutting owners. It is part of another process such as straightening of a real property boundary line. When I look at all that, that seems generally to speak to the fact that the town had clear ownership of something. But and I'm going to mix up a couple things here. One, you're doing this to fix the entire ordinance, but my issue has to do with quote-unquote Denora examples, where the town is perceived to be the current property owner only because the plot line is different than the property line survey. So it was not the intended use, in my view, of the town to own that property. So I see two different ways of this vacating stuff, because when I read this, it seems to imply that the town has an affirmed right to the property. And to me, these examples with Denora it's a accidental circumstance that the town happens to own a property. And I find those two things different.
Well, to put things in context, the language that, you're correct, the code says what it says. That is part and parcel of why this item is before you. That's if it falls within that criteria, then it's the abbreviated process.
Got it.
Which still requires 2 hearings. We're talking about, really overhauling the entire code section from A to Z, from front to back, So it accomplishes precisely what you all want in a cost-efficient, timely manner, but still respecting everyone's rights. And I understand what you're saying, and we will keep that in mind as we develop the new regulations. The Denora situation, as I understand it, is a fact of the plat.
Right.
And it shows up on the face of the plat that area was, whatever the area was, or whatever it is it's dedicated to the Lee County and the town as successor and interest to Lee County when it incorporated.
I'll weigh in and say that Bruce's point seems to be valid, that we look at it maybe in two different ways if it doesn't make it too complicated. And it seems apparent to me that we need to proceed with the motion is to direct the town attorney and staff to begin drafting amendments, and we definitely need, I would say not just, the word amendment implies we're just fixing it. I would say a complete rewrite if I were making the motion.
And I concur. Bruce's point is exactly my concern as well. You know, we've established this policy where we want to get all these canal properties and everything cleared up, and we need to make that a more simplified process. So I agree, we may have two different routes or whatever legal decides on these things, but yes, proceed.
Okay, but now, what about what we just did with Margaritaville?
Wouldn't necessarily be affected unless there were some type of challenge to it, but at this point, nothing. And if they want to come back or need to come back, they certainly can avail themselves of this new procedure once it's in place.
But would it be more appropriate for us to readdress that vacation and do it again under the new rules?
To the extent that there were issues or questions raised and the property owner is willing to resubmit, yet that would be the fail-safe solution.
What do you think, Roger?
Madam Mayor, I believe, you all are talking about streamlining the process as recommended by the town attorney. And by the way, I will echo the town attorney's recommendation based on my experience that our current process is extremely convoluted. That being said, there'll be the person out there that's saying that we're making the bar higher and someone got in under the bar. So if the applicant is in agreement, I would suggest that we put them through the new process as well. And that way they could say, I passed the old process, I passed the new process, I passed both processes. And I think that would make for a clearer statement of everyone's position with respect to the swap. Because I think a lot of people are saying we're giving something away, we're not getting something. It's a swap that was contemplated under that particular item. So if you ask me, my recommendation, if they don't object, would be to put them through both processes, and I suspect they may prevail in both, and if they do, then they will have both of those backing up the town and their position going forward.
How soon would this ordinance come through, though, and then what kinds of delays does that additionally create?
The process would be a couple of months, just because of timing at the most. Probably bring it to you for first reading at the first meeting in January. Timing-wise, based upon my conversations with the property owner and staff, that's not an issue to them.
Yeah, I think one of the streamlined elements of this may very well be that prospective vacations need not go through the land planning agency. So to the extent that that occurs, whether the amendment needs to go through them is something that, John, you could give the council some guidance on.
Yeah, some jurisdictions have the vacating of plats out of their land development code because it's not necessarily something involving the use of land necessarily, and that's up to you all. But certainly the idea is to reduce to a number that you all are comfortable with of how many public hearings are required to actually approve a vacation request.
Okay, so.
Right now, it requires up to 4.
Okay, so I'm glad that you're doing this because clearly there are going to be a lot of properties affected by it, especially as Bruce points out in the Donora corridor there. But with regard to our most recent action, time isn't of the essence. So if coming back to reconsider that vacation could be the best movement. I'm looking at you, John, just for some sort of acknowledgement, and you don't know. I can't bring you up here right now.
Isn't this really up to them to ask us? We're doing a lot of hypothetical talking about.
Not necessarily. We took an action, and it would take a motion to reconsider that decision. Or I suppose, does anybody object to having John come up here right this second?
Yeah, certainly you have
come up, John.
the ability to do so. But as it's coming up, is you can never be too cautious.
Sure,
Or too,
exactly.
So,
Go ahead, John.
I can only say, I know that originally the TPI folks were very pleased that the issue of the vacating came before the council in November, because as you know, the vacating is also tied to the ability for us to get our demo and construction permits.
Right.
So we were glad to get that past us. Having said that, however, I can also tell you that internally, we have had discussions about that process that was followed, and we did have some concerns about it. So if the intent of the council and your attorney is to take a look at that process, those regulations, streamline them, get them a little bit tighter, and then have us come through under those new ones, I can understand the potential benefit to that. Having said all that, as you know, I represent TPI in certain circumstances. I don't speak for them. With your indulgence, I could, if you want to take a quick break, I can make a call or two and try to confirm that we wouldn't have any objection, but that's up to you.
Let me clarify something, John. Mr. Herron?
Yes, ma'am.
So that was at our last regular meeting that we had that hearing. Is that right? Or was it the one before? Last one? I think it was the
November
last
18th.
one. Last meeting. It was the last meeting. Okay. So to reconsider that, we would have to vote on that reconsideration at this meeting, no?
Yes, but you would be reconsidering it under the existing regulations. I think the idea here is that we adopt new regulations and they just reapply.
Okay.
And again,
you agree
you
with
can
that,
never have too much notice, too much due process. So I don't think that there's any downside to doing that.
Yeah, they theoretically could get two approvals for the same thing. And if they don't like the new regulations, they can elect not to apply.
Okay.
There's not one in place now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you. So do you need a motion, John?
They requested a motion.
Go ahead, Roxanne.
I'm going to move that we direct the town attorney and staff to begin a complete rewrite of the town's current regulations governing the vacation of town property and rights of way.
Thank you.
So there's a motion. Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Murphy. And seeing no objection, unless we do have objection by Joanne, do we?
No, but do we just need to add the comment being that and I'm really basing this on Bruce's statement, that property, for instance, along Denora may or may not really be the town's or something. So we really want it to be vacation of town property, rights of way, and easements, or?
We heard a comment. I would
We-
suggest you not limit us and let us take a look at it. And,
Right,
if we
so-
haven't adequately addressed,
Is there another term we should add,
No.
or does that cover everything succinctly?
We're covered.
Very good, thank you.
Submerged land.
That's all. Then I'm good.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is the legal services discussion with Mr. Herron.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, in furtherance of the discussions we've had at the last meeting, as well as the last week's MNP, we've placed on the agenda for your consideration an extension to the legal services agreement. I have met with all of you, or talked with all of you at one point or another regarding your expectations, areas of potential improvement, and to the extent that it is this council's desire to go ahead and extend that agreement, we certainly intend on meeting and exceeding the comments and suggestions that have been given to me over the course of those conversations and meetings with each one of you.
Thank you, John. So, Ray, you were the only one that wasn't very committal at the last meeting. Have you had any epiphany over the weekend? Any thoughts?
I'm in favor at this point, until I have a better option, of renewing John's contract and continued services.
Okay. So, that is anybody else have any comments? I mean, I'm going to wait until Bruce comes
Yeah, we
back
need
into
to
the
wait
room.
for Bruce.
One
My
last
only-
comment. I did make the change to Exhibit B that was requested by the council for the clarification of the monthly retainer versus the hourly rate.
I agree with Ray.
I still maintain my prior position.
So do I.
And Bruce doesn't know what point
Bruce,
we're at?
so I asked Ray if he had more time to think about what his position was, and he wants to extend the contract for Mr. Herron. Are you in agreement with that?
I am.
Okay.
And I am.
Okay, well, let's have a vote then, and,
There's more than one version, and I'm looking for which one so that we know what we're voting on. Can we all?
The one that was handed out this morning is the correct one. It should have an Exhibit B that shows strikeouts and underlines, that shows the change in the,
It's the one that I was looking at.
I have a second amendment, but I don't have do you have another copy, John, that I could see?
ma'am.
Because I'm not finding it. I apologize. Okay, that's the one I have.
that's the one I have too.
This says on December 18th, 2018.
You don't have this one? Here, you can have this. Part of the reason why I reached out to some of the gentlemen who are running for the town council is because And this vote affects 3 new people. And John, your contract is essentially at will. There's nothing, so 3 new people come on and they have a difference of opinion or whatever, then
That's true for anything.
That's exactly right, for anything.
Wouldn't this be the third amendment to the Town Attorney Legal Services Agreement?
No, ma'am, there was an original agreement, there was a First Amendment, and this
Oh,
is the
this
second.
that was the First Amendment, okay. Okay. Well, I'm not going to move it because I'm not in favor of it.
it's
so
already
I-
been moved.
okay.
It's been moved by.
It's not on the screen.
I moved it.
Okay, and there's somebody needs to second. Okay, so there is, and please know that again, John, my no is not for you personally, but simply a policy decision to move in another direction. But the motion carries 3-2. Anything else, John?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Council members' items and reports. Joanne, anything?
I do. Let me get to that piece of paper. Okay. With regard to the supplemental authorization to the sheriff and the Times Square, are you going to handle that before season starts? I mean, in full swing here, about a request for timing at that they hold the pedestrians and let the traffic run? How is that going to be handled?
Yes, I talked to the district captain about it, and I will talk to him again to remind him as I'm getting ready to embark on my vacation. We generally speak pretty much every week or every other week. And I will remind him again that the detail is with the objective of synchronizing the holding of pedestrians to facilitate traffic flow.
Correct. And I don't know what general timing of the light is or how long people generally have to wait when they push those pedestrian buttons, but there needs to be a wait time there for the pedestrians so that we can keep traffic flowing. Secondly, we got a request from the Jewish Faith Group regarding their Hanukkah event and inviting us all, and that's the one at Zoomers. But I know I'm unable to attend. I don't know if anybody else is, but I didn't know if we should be just supportive by just sending a letter of holiday and happy Hanukkah from us to their group. Is that supported by council?
I'd be happy to send a card.
Sounds
Sounds
good.
good.
I think something like that would be great. A happy Hanukkah.
I'm going.
You're
good.
going?
Yes.
Oh, well then
Well, then
forget
we
it.
don't need
Ray's
to.
going.
Perfect. If you're going, that's great.
Oh, you're going? Did you tell your father?
Very good, thank you. Third, Leaky Tiki, what happened with that, with the noise? Season starting, there's a problem last year. It came before and then seems to have been withdrawn. Nothing happened. Remember, we had an initial hearing and then, so is there something going on with that? Or will we be certain there won't be noise issues at that, the Leaky Tiki
Well, no, we won't be
barbecue?
certain. We have regulations to address that, and as you know, the council has authorized us to staff to 10 p.m. So we'll be doing that, and they will be on our monitoring route. It had previously been pretty much the Times Square area, but we will make sure Leaky Tiki is included in our monitoring between 9 and 10 p.m. to ensure at least as best we can when our staff goes home for the day that they're at the correct audible levels.
I think that's great, and I appreciate you saying Times Square too, because, you know, quality of life in our neighborhoods is important, and we do want to stand up for our noise ordinance for those residences that happen to be near more commercial establishments, depending upon their location. The chart for election we already talked about, And wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. Oh, I know. One thing, under the bridge, and I know we're talking about Bayfront Square and everything, but when you go and park under the bridge, and you have those two areas under the bridge, and then you also have that sort of area that I have it's ill-maintained, there's trash and stuff, where there's sort of a retainer wall toward the beachward side of where the bridge comes down over. And I often think, can't we do something simple to make that more welcoming? I feel like I'm so familiar with that area, and I'm even unhappy and uncomfortable when I park there, and I park there frequently. People with little children or different times of the day. I mean, I look at the pillars on that, and I think, if they were just painted cute and just had some high leaves off them, almost to make them look like palm trees, and a little uplighting. Not anything that would be obnoxious, but something that would give you a sense that there's some lighting, that you're at the beach, something more welcoming. And it's not something necessarily we need to decide right now, but I'm wondering if Public Works, I know it's a state bridge, but it seems like we could do something simple in that area to make it more welcoming.
Inviting.
And
If you
feel
remember
safe.
on the
It does
parking-
not feel safe.
No, it doesn't. On the parking study, I think they said that was the last parking area that was utilized, and it's probably for that very reason.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I think early in 2020, we're going to have two very exciting things happen. One is we'll be getting designs for your consideration as it pertains to Times Square, St. Carlos Boulevard, and Bayside Park, along with, of course, with Bay Oaks. And
What do you estimate that, when will that come to us, Roger?
Well, so the second part of that, of course, is the marketing plan. The marketing plan is set for Charette in January. I suspect by early February, we'll be getting to those designs in public forums that the council will be participating in. So once those two things converge, I think, and are approved by council, we'll have something to talk about, whether it's wraps or painting and other things that we can do to develop a consistent theme throughout the town's properties and extend those into properties where the town is a leaseholder or managing the property.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Joanne?
That's all. Just happy holidays to everybody,
The same to you.
especially to all of you. Enjoy your vacations and safe travels if you're
Thank you
traveling.
very much. The same to you. Rexanne, anything?
The Anchorage Advisory Committee sent a representative today because they had passed a motion specifically asking for us to take an action, and that is that we ask the staff to begin looking for alternate sites, just so that there's some alternates out there, alternatives. It's my understanding we're in the last year of our contract with Matanzas. While we're not unsatisfied with them in any large degree, we are getting complaints about insufficiencies of showers and things like that. So the AAC is just asking that we support them by asking staff to start to look into sites. Nothing.
Could I just suggest that we link that conversation with our surplus properties? Because we did have a discussion, was it Virginia Street?
Yeah,
Sure.
we have a right of way there between two residential properties.
was the
So I think, just to be clear, so that there are no unfulfilled expectations, I think if the council's, if we not inclined for us to do something or try to incorporate something into Bayside Park, then the alternative would be for us to probably have to buy a parcel somewhere that might meet that need. So, but we'll be glad to look into it and come back to the council with some alternatives for you to consider.
Well, they would go to the AAC first. They're the ones who are asking for it.
Of course, go through our normal process.
So I just want to be supportive of the AAC. I'm not asking for a dedication of hours and hours of town staff time, but just some preliminary investigation.
And would the state allow us within our easement under the bridge to add additional showers just in the portable? I mean, I go to mooring fields myself, and many of them have the portable type trailer showers. I think they might even have some at Snuckbite sometimes. But some other options. I personally am very concerned about commercial intrusion into a residential area such as the parcel on Virginia. I mean, this is a commercial activity of the town, so I think we need to be careful about that. But hopefully we could look at, and Bay Oaks as well, if we're redoing a building and there might be showers and bathrooms, we always have showers and bathrooms with the pool there already. So I don't know, a lot of different things, but I'm very concerned about intrusion into residential areas. So.
Yes, as we all are, and I forgot about that. That was, for some reason, I had my space in my head different, but, okay, that's exactly.
We'll bring back through the process alternatives to be considered. They'll all have limiting factors, and they'll be vetted through the process.
Great. Moving on. I was thinking a great deal. I looked at our stuff from a prior meeting about the murals, and I was also experiencing some issues with my neighborhood about other issues. And I went back and looked at our prior agendas. We discussed side setbacks and the sunlight plane issues April 9th of 19. Yet we've moved on to start talking about murals, which I consider to be a much less important issue. I would like to suggest, and I would like the consensus of my fellow counselors, that we shelve the mural issue until we move forward on some of these other issues that we started on.
Well, I'd like to do them concurrently, but we do have to do all the ones that we talked about with the LPA, and I think that's what you're talking about.
These went through part of the process. They do not link with murals, so they don't need to be done concurrently. I'd like to see them moving forward.
I had a discussion with an LPA member just Saturday about this, that very issue.
When I went and talked to Jason, he's telling me he's doing this because it's in conjunction with the sign ordinance and they need to fix things. Yeah, I get that, but I don't want Jason spending his time on those things when we haven't finished this other stuff yet, that I consider much more important.
I think I appreciate your help with prioritization of these items, and I don't disagree with you that one's very important.
It's
probably
super important.
So we can move that up, and
and I appreciate their work on the things. I'm just saying, please, let's not use staff time on murals when we've got some real important stuff.
we have a little relief now that the council has basically put a zoning in progress on the mural, so that gives us the time to keep that sort of on the back burner, and we can move forward on these other important issues.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else, Rex?
No.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
I don't have anything earth-shattering. It was a busy week last week, though. The manager and I, Roger, went to the pre-session legislative lunch with that Senator Benaquisto puts on, which was very nice. Then Friday, of course, we were lucky to sit at the mayor's table at the Spirit of the Holidays at Diamond Head. And that was a lovely evening. The mayor's table, we were at the back door last year. We moved up about a couple of feet this year, so we're really moving along. But anyhow, it was a nice evening, very nice for the children, as always, and they raised a lot of money, which was great. And Roger and Jessica were there, and Joanne and Dan, of course.
You.
Yes, and Bruce, of course, and your lovely wife. But and then the boat parade, of course, Saturday evening, which was a lot of fun. And,
Did your dad have a good time?
My dad had a great time,
That's
and
good.
thank you
He
all.
was right
And,
up front.
yeah, it was
He had
really.
the mayor's seat.
It was. He hadn't been back. I don't know if he'd ever been back in those canals over on the San Carlos Island side, and that was kind of exciting for him to see all that and what it's become back there.
Mm-hmm.
I was impressed. But anyhow, other than that.
Madam Mayor, before you go on to Councilor Butcher, I want to say something. To me, it was just an honor to meet your dad, but I think it was just so nice to see him there with his three sons right at the bow of the boat. I mean, I think that was really, really nice. I hope when I'm of his age, my sons will do something similar with me.
That's a very nice thing to say,
It
Roger.
sounds like the old show, My Three Sons, but he
But
actually
he's got 10 or 20.
he has 9 sons.
It's a good thing we didn't all show up. But anyway.
Boat would have sunk.
My three sons squared, or two
There you go.
squared.
Bruce?
Okay, just a couple things. Going back to the case of Denora, is it possible that we change the way we do the setbacks for pool screens to say instead of the property line, let's say the water line, where the water line abuts to the property line for the setback, and not require people to get special exemptions and have to pay fees to come and do this stuff? You'd have to rewrite something, I guess.
We could
Or make it administrative.
We could take a look at that relative to the item we'll be working on and see if we can clarify that as well.
All right, I'm just going to mention something about lighting again. So
Good. Settle in.
I was a little brutal maybe on the American Medical Association last time, so I'm going to update my.
Did your doctor send you your file and
No.
say go elsewhere?
I'm going to update on my, my comments. I just want to reflect on the fact that I ate margarine for 30 years, and now butter is okay to eat, and I'm so happy about that.
Butter is better.
And then I'm also thankful that I didn't take their advice for pain medication and use opiates over these last many years. So, again,
Are you revising it to go lighter on them? Is that what you said at the
No.
outset? Okay.
Bruce, can I add something?
Yeah.
My great-grandfather was a physician in the late 1800s, and I actually have his desk set that was provided by the Heroin Corporation.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
well, I could really get into that because I went to the heroin museum.
But time does march on. We
And
get your point.
Yeah, it's crazy what happened with that.
There's a heroin museum?
Yeah, in Thailand,
Oh, well, okay.
at in the Golden Triangle. But
Right next to the cocaine.
Hall of Fame. Oh, we're really getting punchy now.
Okay.
Sorry, Bruce, continue.
So,
Go.
well, just since you brought it up, did you know that in the 20s, I think it was the 20s, all of the major countries in the world got together and banned the use of opiates because of the problems, and then somehow it got to where it is.
Oh, gosh, darn it.
Well, we had the discussion about the lights and the turtles and will it impact them or not. I made the case one time with a lot of math saying, if I look at the incidence of harm to turtles versus the probability of harm to people, the harm to people is way, way, way more likely.
Exponential.
Exponential, that's the word I was looking for, thank
I
you.
thought so.
I started to say geometric, but exponential. And then if you put the expected value of the human versus the turtle, not that I'm against turtles, I like them a lot, but it's just no contest. What we have to be looking for is the protection of the citizens and visitors here of the beach primarily. And if you can do well for the turtles as well, that's great. But you can't do for the turtles and sacrifice the people. That's my opinion.
And I'm not advocating that, by the way. I believe it's possible to do both.
Yeah, I do too, and I think the new white lights will do both. Okay, that concludes my prepared statements.
Do you have anything ad lib?
No.
Okay.
Anita, I
Yes.
forgot one thing, might I?
Sure, absolutely.
We had a public comment from Mr. Schmid.
It's on my list.
Oh, okay, good. I'll let you address it then.
Oh, that's,
I
go
don't know
ahead.
what's appropriate or not appropriate or why they came forward, but I'll let you handle it.
As I understand it, and I spoke to him, you probably saw me speaking to him beforehand. I don't know this couple at all, but I did hear about their plight, and they're trying to close on this property, and they'd like it to be released out from underneath the umbrella, period, of those liens. And I don't see why we wouldn't afford them that, or why we wouldn't accomplish that for him. It's not going to cost the town anything to do that, is it, Roger?
Well, the concept of the umbrella is that the wider we reach, the sooner we get paid. So narrowing our reach could impact us, but however, according to the notes that I was writing, that they were committing $50,000, if I understood them correctly.
That's correct.
Towards the lien bill, if you will.
That's right.
So subject to verification of everything they say, including their willingness to commit the $50,000 towards the overall lien bill, I would say that if all that bears out to be true and councils of agreement, we can craft an agreement that would pull them out of the umbrella and allow them to proceed.
Excellent.
If
Does
that's
anybody
council's
object- Does anybody
direction.
object to that? Were you going to object to it, Joanne?
No, we want the liens paid.
Yeah, and
We
we want
want,
these properties-
properties to turn over. We want the best use of properties on the island, but we also want compliance. So we're not releasing the other liens, but I think that if this is one way to get this part done, let's get it done.
Yeah, I agree. Was there something in that discussion about the time frame? They were under the gun about getting it done before the end of the year or something?
Yeah,
Is that what I heard?
we'll do our very best to accommodate their timeframe,
Okay.
and hopefully I don't know if it's today or I don't know if it's tomorrow, but, or next week or whatever, but I know it's not, it couldn't wait till the next council meeting, but we'll do everything to be expeditious. But I want to be clear with you all, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the $50,000 is an integral part of your decision.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Well, I don't think he would have said that if he didn't mean it.
Yeah,
So-
the $50,000 is the basis of the conversation. What is the overall, you're talking about the umbrella, what is the overall approximate range of the overall amount that's in that umbrella lien?
The answer is I don't know, because, I really didn't anticipate this whole full conversation, but
It's a lucky
since it
day.
came through citizens' comments, but, as always, we're trying to put the properties back into productive use, and, this request, and since it wasn't the property that actually had the lien on it, wasn't in violation, we have the commitment of payment. Seems to me a good way to put a property back into productive use.
Exactly. Okay, with seeing no objection here on the council, Roger, if you would move ahead with that, that would be wonderful. And Joe, you're here, so you could please relay that message to Mr. Schmidt, if you would. I'm sure he'll hear about it anyway. Roger, can you give me a prospective date on the hiring of the PIO? Where are you in that process?
We're in the process of interviewing. It would be our objective to start the person in January. My hope would be as early in January as possible, not understanding how long might take them to give notice or settle their personal side of the issue, but it would be our goal for them to be working for the town in January.
Excellent, okay. And could we please tighten up the days with the PR firm and the design group, because we have limited meetings left, this group here. And we all said at the outset that those were very important issues to us and that we would like to resolve them. So can you tighten that up as close as possible so that it doesn't pass February?
Well, as we explained, it's our objective to try to get this done before the end of February, no later than early March. But like a lot of that,
Take out early March.
Okay, well,
Just
a
take it
lot of
out.
that, Madam Mayor and councils will depend on the input that we get, but if everything goes through, the council's happy with what they produce, we should make that time frame without any issues.
I would be happy to schedule an additional special meeting of some kind
Yes,
if
so
we
would I.
need to do that to get things accomplished.
Great, okay, so I don't have anything else other than to wish you, Forrest Kritzer, who are sitting here, and Gary, and are you Nathan? Oh, it's nice to meet you. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday if you celebrate something other than Christmas, and to wish everybody here in the town a joyous holiday season as well, and we'll
And
see
it's-
you in January.
And it's a great opportunity to say thank you to all our staff and advisory committees, too.
Absolutely,
To just
absolutely.
Rest of the year off.
specifically pull them out and say, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
without all the volunteers and the people who are our back staff, I'm looking at Ava there in the box and everyone else, I mean, none of this would happen. So Joanne's absolutely right. A very big thank you and happy holiday to everyone. And it's 12:32. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
No objection. We adjourn at 12:33.
Merry
Thank you all. By the way, Amy has lunch up